Welcome to another episode of the Nine Summoning Insight presented by AT&T. We're finally back in a real way now that we, well, not in the realest way. The realest way would be us in a studio, but that's not going to happen for a while thanks to everything that's going on with the pandemic. So even though the studio is inching towards completion, we are still not allowed to go there. But we can be online thanks to the glorious power of AT&T Fiber. I had 3 megabits up. You're still muted. Hold on. I had 3.
Literally by the power of AT&T.
Yes.
Like literally.
Yes, literally, because I had 3 my problem guys in previous weeks as Thorin shakes his delightful supplement underneath the table. I had 3 megabits up and couldn't actually stream during the pandemic. So I called AT&T, switched over to fiber, and now I have like 400 up. So problem solved. Thank you, AT&T.
Although, to be fair, it was actually a rare chance to do some of those like watch party type things we were planning on doing anyway. Like we mentioned it on the show a few weeks back. So we actually will do more of those in the future. It's just that the concept would be, obviously, the regular show should be having guests on and talking to them about what's going on now in League of Legends. So normally that sort of content, in this case, we used it as a stopgap. I would imagine it would be a similar use in the future, either a bonus episode or in the off season when there's downtime, with no tournaments.
I did think it was fun to like look at some of that old content, because honestly I haven't seen
I forgot a lot of
it
that actually
since it was released. So I thought it was a fun way to go back and revisit the horrors of esports history.
I thought the craziest thing about it that I took away from it was, like, I have a pretty good memory in general, but obviously when something funny or like infamous happens, over time, like any fish story, it gets better and better in your mind, right? So I was thinking, I probably like exaggerated how bad Dardock is in Breaking Point. I'm sure Reggie was, it was probably reasonable now. It's more unreasonable. I actually, if anything, like I'd polish some of the hard edges off these guys. Like,
exactly.
They're more unreasonable. Go watch these episodes now, guys. You won't believe some of the one-liners that come out with.
It's true. I was actually, I agree. I was more horrified by what I had seen than I thought I would be, which is saying something, because I remember being pretty mad at the time, but I was even more mad when I was watching it. It was just even more absurd. Perhaps it's just because we're older now too.
It's also because, in theory, keyword theory, we've sort of softened a little bit and come to understand what a professional worldview is and all these things. I don't know how true that is, but I'd like to believe it is.
And that's why we made Flashpoint, where you can just do and say whatever you want.
Exactly. That's the outlet. What we're doing is, instead of just putting a mild amount of toxicity into all the flow of our products, we've got a one pipeline that's the toxicity. That's like the offshoot of the industrial, when they use like industrial waste to make like fucking medicine or something like that. That's what we're doing there. And then elsewhere, we're just nice and clean, pristine, as it were.
I'm not sure about that one, but it certainly is a welcome change. It is kind of weird to just be able to say like fuck and not have to worry about it on a broadcast, just like a normal human being of our generation.
That's one thing people always misunderstand about me is, like, in Counter-Strike, for example, obviously it's the community that would be most forgiving to someone accidentally saying fuck, like it wouldn't be the end of the world. That's happened many, many times with commentators and analysts where they've done it accidentally. But people don't realize, no joke, accidentally, if I've done like 50 LAN tournaments in CS, I might have twice accidentally sworn, because I'm normally actually really good about that. Like, I can sort of in my mind, I just somehow know like that's not allowed on this broadcast, so I never even think the word. But what's crazy is, I was having the same experience. So, by the way, for people who didn't get my point there, I think people just imagine I'm more offensive than I actually am. I think it's just my ideas are more offensive. It's not the words I'm saying as much as it. That's always been my problem. The words I'm saying are usually all right, but the ideas are the offensive thing. So, no, the difference is now when you're actually allowed to do it, it does feel like you get away with something. Oh, shit. After that, I might try that again in a minute. Like, it's actually weird, isn't it? It makes you wonder, by the way, because this is a relevant topic. This is something I've always thought, and we were talking about this the other day relative to IEM. This is something I've always thought was lacking in League of Legends, is that, beyond our show, there never was like a stream that had any kind of an adult worldview to it. They always played to like the teen / like I'd say family audience, Like they never had the adult edge in League, I felt. So I always felt like that should have been like a side stream. If core streaming had existed, maybe we would have gone that route back in the day,
I mean, I mean, for sure. I definitely would have co-streamed had it been an option to me for LCS back in the day, 100%. You know what's weird to me though is like I don't even understand the purpose of not swearing because people say, "Oh yeah, we need to make this broadcast so it's acceptable so that sponsors will come and sponsor the league and so that, it could be on TV and expand." Here's the thing, guys. No one is going to watch a hardcore esport like League of Legends where you have to play the game on TV. Like, you're never going to get that deal. And the thing is, the sponsors are going to come anyway because they're not going to be put off by you swearing a little bit. They're going to come because the numbers and the audience are there. So really, we're just not even catering to our own fans or even being real because everyone in our generation doesn't think that these are curse words. We all say them all the time. It's not offensive at all. It's just part of the lexicon and the way that we speak. So I don't even understand the purpose of banning them because it just makes it less entertaining for everybody and also doesn't actually do anything when it comes to approaching a wider audience. The audience is going to come to us in esports over time. We don't have to do shit. We can just wait here forever and eventually we're going to win.
Yeah, don't you find that almost like incredibly quaint? And it would be like delightful, except it's just actually almost offensively naive, where people are basically their worldview somehow when it comes to capitalism, in the world of League of Legends, is that esports has to be like some sort of troubadour who makes these romantic overtures to companies that like we have the culture and the feel that they want, and that's why they're going to come in money, not because they're all cynical, bloodthirsty businessmen who just want to make money and will literally sponsor anything that makes their company money, which is the obvious reality, isn't it? Like, these must actually be the most people with the most optimistic view of capitalism in the world, League of Legends fans.
Well, here's the other thing is that for years, League of Legends basically didn't sell sponsors. They were notorious for being the biggest esports and actually...
They used to even brag about it.
They used to even brag, be like, you know what, guys? We're not going to be NASCAR. We're not.
I always used to think that was the dumbest angle of all time.
Okay,
we don't even make money off this shit. It's like, what are you talking about? Why would that be good?
It was dumb. It was dumb as fuck. But if you're going to do that, at least make the coolest thing you can if you don't care about sponsors. Like, at least make the thing that the hardcore fans will want the most.
Yeah, actually, that's why that makes even less sense. You're right. I hadn't thought of it that way. It's like when Loco on Listen Loco one time told me on air, like, why don't I just soften my persona a bit, so that I get like invited to the Riot broadcast or whatever. And I said, yeah, but look, I'm not on the Riot broadcast now. Like, when I'm not on it, why would I need to like live up to their standards? Like, they could hire me and I could just do that separately. But like, why would I not be myself when I don't have any pressures or conditions and I can just do what I want? Like, so similarly, yeah, I agree with you. If anything, the fact that they didn't need the sponsors would have been, by the way, now I think about it, this is actually even a mad missed opportunity. Imagine if, because Riot had funded the whole esport from the game sales and didn't need to court the public mainstream, they'd done like a UFC type approach and gone their own path completely, and they'd never had to worry about corporate concerns because it's only their company funding it. They actually might have been not as ridiculous as the UFC, but they could have been in a position like that, where, as you're saying, the sponsor has to come to you and adjust to what you're doing because he wants to be part of what you're doing. They could have done that, whereas what they've done now in League is end up in some weird middle ground where, like, even though the game is still huge, admittedly mainly just from people who play and follow the game, it does feel like I actually feel like League, as much as people think because it's very popular, it's a very mainstream game. I think it's one of the ones that has the least chance of ever being like a television esport or something like that. I feel it'll never make the job. So not least because it's just the game, as we're saying.
Yeah, it's people think about MOBAs and they're like, oh, these MOBAs are huge. The MOBAs are huge because they have huge player bases, guys.
It's mainly just because Chinese people play them, by the way. So how does that help us in the West in like America? It doesn't, does it?
I mean, they're huge in the West as well. They're huge Western esports, but it's because so many people play them. Like, there are 0 people who haven't played League of Legends that watch League of Legends because you have to learn like 150 champions. Like, the burden of knowledge to enter the game is absolutely ridiculous. There are other games like Counter-Strike where you can watch it without ever having played it. So there's a huge difference between these kind of titles, but basically MOBAs survive because of massive player bases, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we talk about the product that could have been made, like, that's what it makes it the whole like pursuing traditional sports style angle over the years even more absurd, which I imagine we're going to get to in a second, because like I want to talk today partially, once we get our guests on, about the format, because to me it's completely ridiculous that there are 18 regular season games, but you could theoretically play 25 playoff matches within a couple weeks, like 3 week span. Like, this format. Now, I am
that would
glad.
be like the NFL playoffs was like 25 games.
Which, look. I like the fact that they switched to double elimination. Don't get me wrong, but it just goes to show that this is another one of those Riot half measures. Like, we could have combined the spring and summer splits and had double elim and had a normal length season. We could have done a series of mini tournaments that lead into a double elimination playoffs that would have been more exciting. But doing like a short season with a playoff, I don't even know what to say. Like, remember, Riot, you did this in the first place because you wanted it to be like traditional sports. But now you've done something that traditional sports don't do. So here's my advice. Just fucking go all in. Just go all in on not doing traditional sports things. Come on, join us all out here who have been in esports forever, who don't care about traditional sports formats. Like,
what happened, Monty? You have to realize the Sith Force ghost of Dustin Beck still haunts the Riot headquarters. Whispering, be like the NFL. We had the NFL. Is this the NFL? How do I get to the NFL? Like, it's never going to happen, is it? Let's be real.
I mean, that was...
We'll see what the players think, though. Maybe they'll have an angle on it.
Yeah, that was one of the top-tier hires of all time. Literally the CEO's brother, Dustin
Dude, it was
Beck.
like someone out of the office or something, wasn't it? Like that character.
Especially if you met him, by the way. So, you know what? Okay, we don't have anybody to lead esports. Who's it gonna be? New VP of esports, 27-year-old Dustin Beck. He was like 2 years older than me at the time. Oh, yeah, he's a vice president. What was he before? A junior analyst at Goldman Sachs. Oh, yes, surely this man who has never worked in sports or esports is highly qualified to be the leader of Riot Esports. And basically, he created a bunch of problems that we still have today. By the way, did you ever wonder where he went?
Where did he go?
That's a mystery for the internet to solve.
Okay. I'm going to guess something dodgy, like some Chinese copies. Something weird happened, clearly, yeah. I will never forget, though, by the way. Shout out to Dustin Beck, because I believe it was when SKT won that first All-Stars, the one that was kind of like the first MSI. I will never forget, because when SKT won, I believe that was when he said the famous thing where he went, "Congratulations to SK Gaming for winning MSI." Or it wasn't MSI, it was All-Stars or whatever. And I remember just sitting there thinking, like, you had one job. All you had to do was say the right name, and everything else would have been. You could have said anything else, but you literally said the name inadvertently of a European org, by the way, implying you don't even know your own fucking game, and mix it up with the Korean team that just won the tournament. That if you'd actually watched the tournament, you'd have known, wouldn't you? So like that was one of the all-time Riot gaffes, I think.
So here's the thing. I believe in his like goodbye post, he said something like he was leaving to pursue his dreams of working in private equity.
Right,
so let me get this.
No one has a dream of working in private equity.
No one has that dream.
That's
so
absurd.
imagine being in Riot and having this game that's blowing up and running esports and saying that. Guys, it might have been a code for something else. Might have been a code. Might have been some code words right there. But we'll leave you with that mystery dangling in front of you. We are going to bring on our guests now. And so we'll be back in just a couple minutes. Welcome back from our beautiful break. I finally got everybody in their respective boxes, so it's going great now. Welcome, Licorice and Brokenshard. You guys congrats on your win this weekend, Brokenshard. Or Licorice. You didn't win, Brokenshard. I'm sorry.
Listen, what year is this when you win that? The show would ever start with that sentence. You're being a bit optimistic there, mate. It's not the beginning of Summer Insight.
I went into a time machine back to 2014 for a second. Okay, something insight. Right. Sorry about that. It's okay. I'm back in the present now.
By the way, Brokenshard, listen, I don't know if you're playing up the meme here or something. I know it's a quarantine, but you are looking fucking absolutely broken right now. You are looking wasted. You're not going to put any effort in. Is it like 7 p.m. there or something?
Yeah, it is. It's 8:30.
You've got your quarantine swag. I'll give you that.
It's been rough. I haven't really been able to do anything. Things are on major lockdown here in Israel.
Mate, you look like a fucking Israeli DJ Khaled or something. What are you doing? Like, put some mousse in the hair or something. Wear a blazer. Are you a coach? Well, actually, by the way, are you technically like the coach of the academy team now, or are you the assistant coach of the main team? What is your current title? Because I know it's been swapped around a few times.
Coach of the academy team, prime team.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
What do you mean? I'm wearing SK stuff. Telecom, let's go. Telecom represent.
Really? Are you actually SK Telecom on your jersey?
Yep. Telecom is our main sponsor.
Dude, Brokenshard, I bet in real life you go around the world and every now and then, right, you meet someone and then they're like, League of Legends, what team do you work with? And you go, SK Gaming. and then you like drop the gaming part, and then they go SK Telecom, or Faker and all that, and I bet sometimes you're just like, yeah, I bet Faker, like, yeah, I bet that's happened before. Come on.
I mean, to be fair, Faker was actually in our Berlin studio with some of our League of Legends teams not too long ago. They came over and used our facility in Berlin to bootcamp for Worlds. So
he
I'm
didn't
just
have a clue who literally any of you were, did he?
I don't think
He
so,
literally
no.
didn't know any of you were. No offense, I mean, he wouldn't know who we are, to be fair, so it wouldn't really matter.
I mean, he definitely knows who I am, but that's fine. I've talked to him
All right,
many
that's a weird
times
flex,
over-
Monty.
What do you mean? I literally worked in his region and talked to him and his family many times over the years. What do you like? I've met him every time he was in the studio. I would talk to him. I'm sorry. You never have.
Yeah, he probably would just say, yeah, I know Monty, Castager Light, right?
Yeah, exactly. You just think I'm the Ellie guy. Anyway, let's get into talking about LCS playoffs. So we're to start here because Licorice can't stay for the whole show because he has things to do like practicing for the next round of playoffs. So
Yeah, I think that's what they said about their match, wasn't it? They were like, we can only stay for 3 games. We're really got to get practicing for the good teams. Actually, like,
the real
it's cool you
opponents.
guys. Yeah, it's cool you guys made the playoffs and everything, but we can't fuck around and give you a game. Like, just can't do it. Sorry, you know.
So I want to talk about your matches because I know that Reaper gets a lot of shit for his drafts, but I actually really loved your game plan coming into this series. So, especially because it was against 100 Thieves, and to discuss 100 Thieves, let's just say Ryoma might not be the strongest mid laner in LCS, and oftentimes gets bullied out of lane. So what I particularly enjoyed about your guys' play is that you basically just had Niski poke him into submission, and Blabber just goes and takes the entire jungler against Meteos playing scaling junglers, like, what was he playing, Sejuani and shit like that? Trundle, right? When he was just getting owned by Kindred 24/7. It just looked like a tailor-made game plan to attack their jungle, shut down Meteos, and just overwhelm them with early game skirmishing and poke pressure.
Yeah, I think our draft and then like our planning going into the matches was actually like really excellent this time around. I think that like we had like a bunch of draft meetings where the whole team like discussed it, and of course like Reaper's leading that always. And I think we did a really good job. We made sure we secured like a really good bot matchup every time because that's always been one of our strong points through the whole regular season. And then like top lane is kind of just a bunch of like flip matchups right now. So I was totally fine playing whatever. And then we made sure we got like the good jungler for Blabber, strong mid laner for Niski, and the games just went pretty easily from there.
To be fair, Monty, when you said Reaper gets a lot of shit for his drafts, he gets shit for his Game 5 drafts. Like, the actual team themselves have figured out how to counter Reaper now. They've actually made up for his weakness. If you never get to Game 5, he has to just do the real draft, doesn't he? You can't be a hero at that point in time. Well, you'd basically, Reaper's the player where as long as you're up by 10, he'll just play normally in basketball. If you're down by 2, clear out because he's going 1-on-4 in that draft. That's all I'm going to tell you.
No, I just think that in this particular matchup, it just made a ton of sense.
You think the jungle was the biggest impact on the series?
Well, I'm trying to remember. Sorry, I sometimes screw up based on the. Okay, I was just going to check here because you guys have not played Kindred in the jungle all
Probably ever
season.
this split, I'm sure. Yeah. Why would they?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I have to be careful about saying that because I see you guys as scrims sometimes. So, like, you know, I know things, so I just have to make sure that
that would be
I'm
an
not making
epic
a
gaff,
mistake.
by the way, Monty. If you use a Cloud9 talk show to literally accidentally spill a
Leak
secret
Cloud9
draft, yeah, exactly. That would be the most next level fucking draft fuck up of all time.
Yeah, well, we're not gonna do that. So yeah, I just had to take a look real quick because you guys hadn't played Kindred, so it was really interesting to me that you guys pulled out Kindred in that situation. But the more that I thought about that draft strategy and how it made sense, and also it was just disgusting the fact that the pathing he got in that game where he had like 2 marks immediately and he got both scuttle crabs and like it was like 2 levels up in the jungle. It was just complete fucking dominance, but it totally makes sense if that's going to be your plan. I'm just shocked that they never banned Zoe in this series.
It's literally the dumbest play.
It's literally Niski's signature champion for his
Yeah.
entire career. In case anyone didn't follow LEC, like it's ridiculous. Also, by the way you know that just like certain other players who have their signature champions that they can play when it's not that meta. That play he made in the top lane where he literally pulls the minion.
Oh, yeah,
so he
sick.
can put that is sick. I've actually never seen anyone do that.
He's pretty good at Zoe.
I was fire. Put it this way, I'll give him credit now. Before he was a Zoe abuser, you're not even abusing now. It's not even the most broken champion. He's just good on it.
Yeah, it's actually been a bit of a meme around our house because Niski's been playing Zoe like the whole season. And every week he played Zoe on stage and then he'd go into scrims. He's like, all right, guys, I don't want to practice that much Zoe because someone's going to ban it. We're like, yeah, sure, man. But, we should probably keep practicing it. Every week it's still open. And every week he just keeps playing Zoe. So maybe next week will finally be the week where a team will ban it in the playoffs now. And we'll have to see him play something else. So I think he's looking forward to that.
I mean, I'm confused at their whole draft strategy going into this game. Because, you have the Senna ban, right? And then you have the Gragas ban. They banned Senna and Gragas both times they were on blue side. I don't get the Gragas. That's what I don't get. I also I don't really get the Pantheon. Considering what was going on with them, it just seems like they were kind of comprehensively owned in this series. I don't even really think they ever had a shot because they.
Well, that's one thing to say, isn't it, Monty? One thing that might have a problem with this series is who actually expected this to be competitive. One of the reasons I personally haven't given 100 Thieves that much credit for making the playoffs is they made it because Someday just styled on 5 games towards the end of the split or something. He just 100 Thieves didn't make the playoffs. Someday did. There you go. This guy 1v9 some of those games. So. How were they going to do that when arguably the best top laner in the league is the player playing against him in the playoffs? That's the worst matchup at that point in time. They're not going to get the edge that they had over some of the bad teams that they were feasting on. So I came into this series, I wasn't even worried about the draft. I don't know where they were going to get their edges. Can anyone even theory craft what 100 Thieves could have done?
Yeah,
let's do a theory craft. Come on. What would you go with, Brokenshard?
Okay, so the Gragas ban I think is fine because
You're very
Gragas
quiet. Move your face.
Be quiet again.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Yeah, so Gragas is fine ban because the champ is really broken. Predator just makes solo laners' brains turn off, so it's fine. The one thing I would have dropped was the Senna ban. Even though Senna's OP, even though Senna's kind of OP, you kind of want Sven on Senna rather than on Aphelios or Kalista. Sven is the best player on that team, the best AD in NA by miles. Put him on the fasting Senna. Sure, they'll probably play it well, but you get an extra ban for, I don't know, Zoe? Because Ryoma's not good enough to take any of those skill matchups into Zoe. The ones that do well into Zoe are good mid-jungle duos, like Yasuo comps, for example, or Syndra. But Syndra is still a skill matchup if Zoe gets good RNG. And Niski's a really good Zoe. Your weakest player is mid lane. Don't put him on skill matchup. Doesn't make sense.
Let's definitely put our mid laner on in a mobile champion and see how he does in his first playoff series. Oh, shit, he's got wrecked.
Well, I mean, this is the whole problem, though. If we were to describe 100 Thieves as issues, if we were to describe the way they win games, like you said, Thorin, it's them coming in and having a strong split push game on Someday where he basically just solo wins the game for you. So you need to just make sure that your jungle is safe because Meteos just was completely gimped this entire series.
Yeah, everything should be about jungle top in this series, logically.
Yeah, and so... But the reason why they have to play that way is because Ryoma, so the reason why Meteos wants to play these tank scaling junglers is because he never has map pressure, right? So he knows he's just going to be farming. He's trying to avoid taking the 1v1s that he would lose and trying to scale into the late game because Ryoma's just he gets chunked out so easily in lane that he never exerts any pressure at the center of the map. And even if he does do well in lane, he's still such a rookie player that he never actually he never leaves his lane ever, basically. And so if you know that information, why I appreciated what C9 did was they brought out new dueling junglers and then basically just took the fight straight to Meteos. And meanwhile, Niski's just sitting there in the mid lane, just constantly poking Ryoma with the Zoe Qs. So there's no way to respond here. There's nothing they can really do. And so when the aggression started, it just snowballed insanely out of control.
I'm inclined to disagree a little bit, just because considering the champions that Ryoma does play, like Syndra and LeBlanc, if your mid laner is struggling and playing those champions, at least in the 1v1 lane, you play for a good 2v2. But has Meteos played a single game of Lee Sin this split?
I can check for you.
I doubt it. It doesn't feel like it from memory.
But what I'm saying,
like Licorice
what I'm saying is the
because
combination of these champions like makes it so they never have the opportunity to exert pressure.
Like the thing is, if your mid laner's a Syndra player, you play Syndra Lee. Syndra Lee is insanely strong, and like that's what 100 Thieves could have done. But I actually don't think the issue is Ryoma. Yeah, I don't think Ryoma's that great of a player, but he's also like picking the champions that aren't complemented by Meteos' pool. Like Meteos played Trundle, Sejuani, and Jarvan into Blabber. And Blabber, like, he was pretty much subbed into C9 games to play shit like Kindred, Nocturne, and Lee Sin.
Yeah.
Like, you're not gonna
I actually just looked it up now.
Meteos
like,
played one game.
Yeah, he played one game and he lost it.
Yep.
And then if you look at what he plays, it looks like they got the bands mixed up. Like they banned his Gragas. Like what the fuck is that? Like did they get him switched around or something like that?
So to put this in perspective, guys, he played 7 games of Gragas. It was his most played jungler. Then it was Sejuani, Trundle, Jarvan. Those are his top 4
Which were the ones he played in the series?
Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, Blabber's Gragas is just as good, but if you give Blabber Gragas, then you can take Sejuani for free. And then you have a good jungle match.
I'm with you on this,
That's
Brokenshard. Okay. I actually think the flaw here was that they almost like agreed that there was no chance to win and just did just something. Whereas like I kind of agree with you. You have to pick you pick your poison. So pick the one that's the lesser of two evils in this scenario and give them something that's like it's not bad, but it's not the most dangerous thing for them. Like you're right. In theory, you should want Sven to pick Senna. He's going to be way less dangerous than certain other picks he can get in the series.
Yeah. I think that they just banned what's OP because these are really broken champions, but like they had no answer to the versatility of the picks. Like I love the Nocturne pick. I think that Nocturne into Syndra players like C9 with Jensen way back at Worlds did this exact. Licorice is smiling because he knows when Syndra and LeBlanc were like the 2 picks, you went LeBlanc Nocturne against Syndra and crushed it. And C9 did that exact thing at Worlds like 2 or 3 years ago, and they just pulled it out here again, and it's so genius. I would have expected something like this coming out of Blabber, honestly. Like, if you know what kind of player he is, I feel like this is really, like, almost predictable.
Right, the only thing is, Monty... Oh, there we go. Come on. Right, I was just going to say it. This isn't like fucking high school Licorice where you can just sit at the back and keep your head down and no one's going to ask you questions. You're not supposed to be telling... We'll let you talk about the game you played. Come on, give us something.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that the Nocturne is actually kind of a C9 classic. Like, when we're at Worlds or, like, playing important playoffs matches, we just pull out the Nocturne, and it's always one of those picks where you go on stage, the enemy team's like, oh, Nocturne 6, I can't play the game. I'm going to hug my tower. And they just like get really scared. And then also to talk about the earlier point with Ryoma, I think that like if you look at Meteos' last 4 games in the regular season, it was like Sejuani, Trundle, Sejuani, or like something like that. So going into the series, we knew that we were going to have the winning mid 2v2, and the game was never really like in Ryoma's hands at all to like give him a little credit.
Plus, I mean, you were actually just dumpstering Someday. I mean, you were like solo killing him. So where is their win condition at that point in time? If he's just straight up losing the 1v1.
Yeah, I think that like honestly, the draft is just really hard from their perspective, just because our champion pools are bigger than theirs. Like I think that that's basically what it comes down to at the end of the day, that we play more champions. So it's just really, really hard for them to draft.
Well, you had like you had like 2 blind Ornn games in the first 2 games, something like that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and he played GP and Aatrox. And like Ornn is a really bullshit champion. Sorry if I'm cursing. Like Ornn is just bullshit.
No, it's fine. You can curse. It's okay. He is bullshit.
If Someday is your best player, right? And then they even messed this up. If Someday is your best player, and Licorice, he can play tanks, and I think he can play Ornn. Why are you giving Ornn away?
Yeah, basically.
Ornn is broken.
Like, this will just be another quick tag on to this is why I hate global meta thinking. Because I'm with you, Brokenshard. I think they just banned stuff they thought was OP. Whereas what they should have done was realize the opponent they're playing, like the biggest strength of Cloud9 right now is they can play through any lane. So as a result, like they're going to have advantages somewhere. So what you should have done is ignore them almost. Just try to set yourself up. Just give yourself the best chance in the game. Forget what they're going to do. You can't ban them out, can you? They don't have like just only a mid laner that carries or something. What do you actually think? Like, yeah, go on.
You don't have a perfect team, and that's okay. Like that's not the problem. Like C9 was 17-1 in the split. They can play through anything, but they're probably going to want to play through mid 2v2 because that's where Niski shines, roaming and making pressure on the side. And then you have good silence to play around. So keeping that in mind, you get rid of champions that Licorice can neutralize matchups on, or just really stupid OP champions like Ornn, and then you put Sven on a champion that doesn't receive that pressure well, like Senna, and then you kind of make up for Meteos's inability to play certain champions to make a good mid 2v2 and artificially create a situation where C9 doesn't get a dominant mid 2v2 and then play the game out. Like, that was their best chance of winning, but I don't think 100 Thieves ever win that series. This is just like, if I was 100 Thieves...
Yeah, this is just a chance to get a look better or win a game. Yeah, I get you. They were never going to win the series. I'm with you on that. Licorice Storm.
100 Thieves would lose because they're worst team, but they also had really shit planning. And I guess that's what we're talking about, is that their planning for the best of 5 was really not good, and C9 knew exactly what they wanted to do. It wasn't exactly hard because they got everything they wanted for free, but still.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like you could just say that about their entire 2020 so far.
I don't want to be that harsh.
I don't want to be. What do you mean? Harsh against whom? The rest of the league for giving them everything they want all the time?
Perhaps, maybe not necessarily the case, because C9 would have won like with so many different stuff. They were just a better team every single game.
You know, I want to talk about that, Licorice, because one of the complaints about LCS in general is that people always say, well, how can we be good without good practice? Which is, I think, demonstrably false, because we've actually shown that random esports teams in random countries can occasionally be very good in other esports, even with limited amounts of practice against top-tier competition.
Yeah, like Cloud9 now, right?
Yeah, like Cloud9 now. No, exactly. Like, you guys look like a quite good team on an international level in terms of your play and your versatility and your calling. How has that been possible when your practice partners have been so weak?
Honestly, I think that practice, like actual practice, comes down to you like improving yourself and not actually caring at all about who you're playing against or who you're practicing against or anything like that. Because even if you're playing like training tool against actual bots that like walk up to the wave, auto it, and die, you can still
don't talk about Ryoma like that.
Skills.
Come on, man. Anyway, continue.
If you don't attack it, does he not attack you back? Is that how it works?
Well, no, but like for me personally, like I spend a lot of time practicing in like training tool, like on like low paying like training mechanics and all that, and I just feel like so much of getting good at League is like not actually just like mindlessly playing solo queue or mindlessly playing scrims. And I think that this year we've had a really good focus on actually working on improving like where our weaknesses are, like as a team, and then like everyone as players. And I think that everyone's just been working really hard.
By the way, Monty, I actually have an interesting anecdote I can relate to this, because a similar thing happened once in Counter-Strike, right? It was 4 years ago where the #1 team in the world became a Brazilian team. It was the guys who are now MIBR, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
When they became the best team in the world, they actually were in the NA region because they'd moved from South America to North America, and they just lived in like a house in LA, basically. And the reason why it was crazy that they became #1 is because at the time, the other NA teams were like, like just borderline top 10. They were nowhere near the top European teams. And in fact, it was always like Swedish teams, French teams winning the championship in Counter-Strike. And so when this team became #1 and actually like changed the whole way the game was played, I remember on a podcast, I did an interview with the coach of the team. And I said to him, but the thing that NA players who I talked to always used to complain about is like, well, how can we get good as the Europeans, though? Because like, we have to practice each other. And so the quality of practice is really bad. And so I said, so how did you guys circumvent that? And he literally said what they did was when they would play a scrim against the North American team, because they weren't playing the European teams, he said they would just play as if it was an offline real match against the best team. And so if there was a moment in the scrim where they could have done something like cheesy, or someone could have just won off pure individual skill, but not followed like proper meta play, they wouldn't do it. They would be like disciplined and make themselves play as if they were playing the best team in the world. And that sounds like, something out of a movie or something, but it was real. That was like really the approach they took, so that when they got to play the real teams, they hadn't trained themselves like I think TSM has done for the last 10 years to think like, oh, it's hilarious styling all these noobs in scrims, and then you come and play like SK Telecom, and then you're the noob in the scrim now and he's styling on you. Like that, I think it actually works. There's something about that mindset. I mean, even the fact that Licorice said he uses the practice tool. You know how many modern pros would be like, oh, I don't need to do that. Like, I'm already a pro. I'll just play solo queue. It's like, yeah, but in solo queue, you're not going to practice the same things, presumably, that you practice in the practice tool, right? You're just going to get weird practice in every area of the game.
Don't forget, NA solo queue sucks ass.
Yeah. Like, to me, using the practice tool the way he says is just like when Steph Curry goes and shoots like 400 3-pointers before he plays the game. It's not like he doesn't know how to shoot a 3-pointer. He's just drilling something over and over, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I mean, I would honestly kind of say that it still is obviously a disadvantage to have like the worst solo queue with higher paying and the worst competitive like teams to practice against. But at the same time, it's like the way you want to look at it as a professional player is like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to figure out better, like more efficient ways that I can practice and actually become really, really good without having to rely on the solo queue or just like scrims.
Right, someone clip that and send that to Double Lift. Tell them we figured it out. It took us 10 years, but we figured it out. Listen to that. We just said there, Double Lift, and do it. Stop making excuses.
I mean, what Licorice is saying is kind of like the perfect mindset to have, because there are only so many things that you can control within a practice environment, and as a coach, it's like really important to make sure that you are controlling as many things as possible to get the most for your players. You cannot ever control how the other team's going to play. You can only control how you're going to play. And so there are like many situations in past teams and even in current situations in which you are playing against a worse team for whatever reason. Scrim got canceled. You have to find something last minute. And they're a team, let's say like a lower tier Turkish team, for example, as an LEC team. And you're thinking, I don't want to scrim these guys. They're bad. This is like the wrong mindset to have. That's basically like the easy way out. You are making life easy for you by trying to find good opponents to challenge when you should be focusing on challenging yourself every game. And I think that NA teams have just been blaming that, like, oh, our team sucks, so we can get better, and no one's really trying to take the initiative. But the one org that's consistently been trying to push the boundaries of like practice has always been C9. So it doesn't surprise me that they're the first team to kind of, let's say, crack the code or find a way to improve despite, in my opinion, like a really bad NA league, right?
Like, put it this way, Licorice. I'd even ask this follow-up question. So obviously you guys didn't go the perfect season. You were close. You went 17-1. I always say that when that Fnatic team years ago did do that 18-0 split, like, people don't appreciate actually how hard that is, because what they don't get is once you're like 10-0, 12-0, once you've basically beaten everyone in the first round robin, and then you're already heading towards like, you're definitely going to make playoffs. You're going to be number one seed. If someone had the loser mindset you were talking about before, of like you just play to the level of your opposition basically, and it's like unless someone pushes you don't go for it. You'd never be able to do an undefeated split. You'd mess up a few games. You'd be like G2 last year. You'd throw the odd game here and there. You'd make, who cares? It's just fun. I bet it's actually very difficult, even though you're winning the games easily. It's hard to keep focused, I imagine, right? When you're 12-0, 14-0, and everyone's telling you you're going to go undefeated.
I think that the really hard thing there was actually to make sure that we weren't just playing the games to win them. Like, when you're 10-0,
Okay.
it's like very like enticing to be like, yes, we should go 18-0 and have an undefeated split, and that's going to be super cool. But like, the end of the day, it doesn't actually do anything, because if you go 18-0, everyone's like, wow, that's so cool, and then you go into playoffs and you lose because you never practiced anything and you were just playing like one strategy that you were good at the whole time. Then people are like, oh yeah, you're actually a shit team the whole time, and like no one actually cares that you went 18-0.
Shout out Immortals season 6. Sorry, what? Keep going.
I mean, for us, the hard thing was just to keep going and being like, okay, like this is still what we need to work on. Like, we're 10-0 right now. We're going to get first place, but we still need to like fix these things. And this is the draft we want to do this week. And that is actually where I think that like Cloud9 did such an amazing job this split.
I think it was probably a big relief for you guys when you lost the game, because that meant you didn't have to keep it was out of your mind, right? You're not going to get the perfect season anymore anyway. So now there's no reason not to just work on shit. Like, it's completely out of the picture. I imagine it made your life a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, we did the interview after. It was like, losing is never fun. Like, I never want to lose, but it wasn't bad. Like, it wasn't bad that we lost.
Yeah, it's no big deal.
Did
I agree with you, by the
learn
way.
anything in that loss? I'm just curious.
I think the main takeaways from that one were that we were like a little bit too cocky in that game. We like took 4v5s that we like didn't have to, and also that we didn't actually really respect their draft. It's like some weird thing where we didn't pay attention to what they wanted to do with their champions, so that like at 20 minutes when Jarvan ulted in, they got like a 4-man Zillion bomb and one shot us all with like AoE. We were like surprised that it happened, because like no one like got to that point where they were like, oh, like what are they trying to do? They're trying to like team fight, wombo combo, one shot us all. So I think that it was kind of like a little bit of disrespect, and it was like a good wake up call to like make sure that we actually paid attention to what they were doing as well.
Can I express that, like, I don't really care that you guys lost a game. I do care that you lost to TSM, and I extra care that you lost to Bjergsen and Zillion. That just offends me.
Monty. Listen,
That's like
I've seen
the
it
worst
work
thing you
before.
could have done.
That was like setting up the storyline for later. Like they had to make the finals interesting. They couldn't just go 18-0 and then everyone would just be bored. Like you have to give those TSM plebs hope. Remember, r/solo mid is just 24/7. Some like uber conspiracy as to why secretly TSM is still the best team, and they're always trying to figure out reasons. So this is giving them some hope. We've given them a breadcrumb.
That's true. It will make their eventual disappointment sweeter. So
their punishment must be more severe. Exactly.
Okay, great. All right, I'm with you.
One of the other things, though, that made, I think, actually entering the playoffs not as hype as it could have been is as much as everyone obviously slagged off all the teams who were below Cloud9 because, like some of them just became really bad by the end of the split. The saddest thing for me was the other team that looked good, aside from TSM and Cloud9, was FlyQuest. And they picked exactly the end of the split to start slumping and just going off a cliff. So it's like you can't even believe. Like I'm not surprised that they got wrecked the way they did. Like that's sort of they were the number 2 team for most of the split, and at the end they just lost it all. Which, to be fair, they never should have been that high anyway.
Well, we did at the start say that they had a high floor and a low ceiling in terms of skill. I mean, there were teams that like Dignitas as well, that started out winning games and then just sort of slowly falling off a cliff over time. Not to say FlyQuest fell off a cliff, because obviously they're still one of the better teams in the league, but they haven't progressed as much as teams like EG and TSM have.
They don't look like they're going to challenge in the playoffs, let's be real. That's the problem.
So here's a question. Viper versus Solo. Tell us your thoughts on these players, Licorice, because they've been bouncing around between these two guys. Viper obviously started out really impressive, like having some good games on Riven, but then just leveled off and never did anything. Solo allegedly has some attitude issues, let's put it that way, and that's
His name's appropriate.
All right. Licorice, tell us about the attitude issues, Brokenshard, because you'll be willing to talk to this. Licorice, we won't make you step into the minefield.
No, it's not that I don't know too much. It's just always funny because back when we were on E United with when I had Licorice as my player, it was always like he was always just telling us, "I'm going to shit on Solo so hard when we play against him." Like, that's literally all he ever wanted to do, because when we were scouting for the team,
this guy Vader.
We were between Licorice and Solo, and we got Licorice because actually Solo wasn't available. So we picked up Licorice. He wasn't necessarily our second choice, but it was between us two. And so it's like always Licorice talking about Solo is always super funny. The attitude issues, I never worked with him personally. I've just heard secondhand statements. He's just a kid, you know? He just like gets really frustrated and angry and tilts. That's the most of what I've heard, and people don't like really playing with him, especially in solo queue.
Problem is, he is good. Like, he definitely has some skills.
Really good. And like the way he played those games against EG, like Viper should have never been playing like the way Solo was playing. That kid was crazy.
By the way, you should definitely tell that story differently, because in that story, you accidentally revealed that you wanted Solo before you wanted Licorice. So, like, your talent scouting, it's questionable, Brokenshard. There's questions to be asked there.
I had to do my due diligence, man.
Okay.
I needed any players.
What do you think, though, Licorice? What are your thoughts on Solo and Viper as well?
Well, I mean, coming up in Challenger, like, he was the premier top laner to be. Like, before it was Chris, and then Solo came in, and Solo was like the best Challenger top laner by far. So like when I was starting out, it was like, okay, I have to be better than this guy to be good in LCS, right? And that was kind of always the benchmark. So I was always trying really hard to beat him. So just to tag that along to Brokenshard's story, but more about to the point of like the Solo versus Viper kind of thing. I think that Viper is like, he's a carry player, but he's just not like top tier carry player, basically. So he'll take resources, and
you know what we call that?
He just won't
not
be able
a
to
carry
do.
Bad player.
Not a carry player. But anyway, continue.
Okay.
I mean, it's just a style thing. Like, I don't want to shit on Viper, because I think that like at certain points he's been really good, but he just seems kind of inconsistent as a player. And Solo is a kind of player where he's like the pressure sponge kind of top laner, where he sits there and he doesn't take much jungle attention, and he sits there and he gets ganked. And allegedly he gets pretty mad about it, but I don't know too much about that. But he's like really, really good at playing weak side top lane, and Viper's more of a strong side top laner. So I think that when you're choosing between the two players, it's really just like, do you want to play top side or do you want to play like mid bot side? And
I mean, Viper basically needs you to play to him, right? Through lane phase.
I mean, it's just like the style, like how he plays and the champions he picks. So it's not really like he needs the help per se, but it's just like, I mean, he does because of the champions he picks, but it's not like a person.
It's also kind of in the way that FlyQuest draft that in a sense for a while it really did suit the way that Viper wanted to play. They would oftentimes like hold his pick to pick stuff like Riven into Aatrox, which is like circumstantially a good matchup for Riven, where Riven kind of outscales it, and also like Power of Evil mostly playing control mages, so it's really easy to blind pick them and open up the picks for them. Just like in the way that they were drafting, it didn't give them any advantages against EG in the series. And when you're not getting these advantages for Viper, like Licorice is saying, like he needs the resources to like sort of carry. It's just not worth it. And then Wild Turtle also didn't really have that great of a showing in that series. So it's like the only person that really was pushing the issue was Power of Evil. And then when Solo came in, then you had Solo as a focal point as well.
I actually feel
Viper wasn't really delivering.
I really feel bad for Power of Evil because I think like he's actually been one of my favorite players to watch in LCS this year, and I think like he's had a really good year and is just like an insanely talented player.
He could be on a better team for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Like I think he's probably the second best, if not best, mid laner in LCS right now. He plays a very different style than Nisqy. Also, Nisqy's so tricky because like he plays a style that is so suited for Cloud9 that it's very difficult for me to think about what he would be on a different team, if that makes sense. Like, it's not that I haven't seen him on a different team. It's that the way he's playing the game right now is so great for C9 that it would be hard, I think, for him to be removed from C9 and still be as successful on another team. Whereas at least Power of Evil, I think, is definitely more of a plug-and-play player. But he wouldn't be as good as Nisqy on C9, if that makes sense.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah. Anytime you want to, mate. If you want, just even interrupt him. It's allowed.
Just yell at us. This is a show about yelling at each other, so go for it.
Yeah. So I would actually jump in, and I just want to say, like, make a quick comparison for Nisqy. I think that Nisqy is actually a really comparable player to Doinby.
Yes, obviously.
And obviously Doinby won Worlds, and Nisqy hasn't won Worlds yet, so like, Doinby is like up here for now. But it's kind of like Doinby won Worlds, and he was like playing really well, and he fit really well in FPX. And at the same time, you had all these mid laners being like, man, Doinby is so trash. This guy like can't lane and all this stuff. But like he won Worlds, and he hard carried his team to the World Cup.
And he played for his jungler. It's some good comparison, I think.
Yeah. He played for a new mechanical jungler. Yeah, absolutely.
I activated him on the map. Yeah.
I actually think Nisqy is a better mechanical player than Doinby. But yes, the comparison is apt.
Yeah, like I think it's just a certain style of play, and Nisqy is just really, really good at it. So like that is where a lot of like the trouble comes when you're trying to compare other mid laners to him. But I think that Nisqy is a really, really good player.
I also think it's not as genuine to say that about Nisqy, because in past teams he kind of did play the Power of Evil role, like back on Splice and even way back on Envy. Like Nisqy was a 4-lane carry player, depending on the jungler that played for him. Like Lyra didn't play super well, so he played for Nisqy, and Nisqy like popped off, I think, in their last game against TSM a couple years ago, back when NB was in the LCS. Then in Splice, he was a hard carry player for that team, played stuff like Cassio and was legit popping off. Power of Evil has Centaurin, and Centaurin has kind of always been known as the supportive type of jungler. Like, he will play for his laners rather than for himself. And then you have Blabber. Nisqy has Blabber. And so, like, Nisqy's not going to say, Blabber, play for me. He's going to be like, yo, Blabber, I'm playing for you. Like, you just go. So...
It is worth adding in to add to that, Brokenshard, because you implied it, but if anyone didn't watch LEC, they wouldn't know. When Nisqy was on Splice, where you were talking about there, he also had Cersei, and that is where the whole meme came, that Cersei's the most passive fucking jungler ever, never does anything, basically. So you never had the tools to do this before, right? That's kind of what you're implying, right? Blabber's the first player you had that you could really play this way. Because obviously Mira had the disconnect of being Korean, etc.,
Yeah, Blabber's the first type of player that's kind of enabled Nisqy to become this type of player. And I think that while Power of Evil has always played that style, Nisqy could potentially do both. And I think that if I was scouting and creating a team, I would actually rather have Nisqy. Just because that type of proactive mid laner can create a lot more opportunities. And it's easier to kind of tone it back and be played for than teach a person to play for someone else.
Yeah, but we're also basically having a discussion here about different GM strategies, aren't we? Like, the difference is you could probably plug Power of Evil into many different things and he'd just do his job. As you're saying here, if we don't have the jungler, if we have some whack jungler, Nisqy won't be as effective. He'll still be a good player, but he won't be as effective, will he?
No. I actually think that Nisqy could be effective playing a Power of Evil role.
You think he would be better than Power of Evil, though?
I don't know if he would be better. I think he could be equal. It's just not the type of champions. Like, I don't see Niski being like an Azir Victor player, but if like Ryze Cassio become meta again, or like these like fighter control mages, he would probably do just as good.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I also just want to say that like Niski has been playing this way because it works, and that if he wanted to become like a PoE kind of plug and play style mid laner, I'm sure he could because he's very talented. It's just not the way that he's playing right now because it's what works best for our team.
So here's a different question for you guys. The game hasn't changed that much since Worlds last year when Fun Plus Phoenix won, and everybody saw how effective the roaming style of Doinb is. We haven't seen a major shift in the metagame that would cause that to not be true. And if anything, the new Drakes and like the Dragon Souls have meant that being able to roam and apply pressure early has led to, you know, increased objective control and the ability to like force Dragon Souls very early on in the game and force those fights. So why is it that more teams have not sort of moved themselves into the more FPX style in the way that Cloud9 has?
It's really hard. Like I think that I think that's as simple as it gets because like it's really difficult. Like when you watch Doinb play at Worlds, he was able to move. I mean, I heard rumors that, or I think he talked about it on stream, that like when he played against Faker in scrims, it like wasn't very pretty. But when he played against every other mid laner, he was able to get move timers every time he wanted one. Like every time Gimgun built a wave, or every time bot lane built a wave, or they like needed a gank or needed help, he was able to like push out and move every single time. And it's like really insane to know your matchups that well that you can consistently do that, or like know exactly what jungle resources you need to be able to like help out your team. And Doinb was able to do that. And I think that Niski is also able to do that. And I think that it's just really, really hard and takes like a really high level understanding of the game.
What do you think Niski had to learn in order to do that then? Like, what was he working on within the team?
He watched a lot of Doinb. Like that was it. Like we were at Worlds and we scrimmed FPX and they stomped us. And Niski was like, all right, this Doinb guy is good. And I'm going to like do what he does. And like that, like.
So what,
like,
all I'm going to say is this, Monty. So Niski apparently watched Doinb win Worlds and thought, maybe I could learn something from this guy. Went away, developed his game. Nemesis watched Doinb at Worlds and was like, this guy is the shittest mid laner, and then degraded as a player. So the lesson is, I'll give you a theory craft though. The problem I think in this scenario is it's not like when Samsung White won Worlds and basically every support in jungle just copied what they did for the next 2 years and that became the way you play League of Legends. The problem is FPX as a team, I don't actually think, by the way, they sat down and came up with that genius way of playing the game. It comes from the personnel. Like they have one of the weirdest world champion teams I've ever seen because the two best players on the team were the fucking jungler and the support, and all of the laners, including LWX, were actually like nowhere near the best player at their position. Like they weren't the best top, best mid, the best AD carry. Like the mid obviously had this extra implied value with the shot call, he does all this. The top player was basically like a weak side player in a tournament with the Shy and all these monsters stomping top lane. And then LWX, I didn't even think was that great. So what, like they had almost like an inverted team. Normally you get the laners of your strength, you know, and then you're working with one good jungler or the support's a bit average. So I don't know that anyone's got like the monster support jungle duo to do that in most regions.
But here's the thing: that is an indication that League of Legends itself has moved so far in the team play direction from an individual play direction.
I mean, the fact that they beat IG just shows that it wasn't about laning, was it?
Yeah, I actually have a video coming out on this topic in a couple days, which is me talking about the sort of history of Riot's balancing of League of Legends and how it went from like 2013. I linked a video on Twitter, a VOD on Twitter, like a week ago. About Faker in 2013 in a game.
The most forgotten game ever. That's you know what I always say this, Monty.
That game is extremely important to League of Legends history.
You know, whenever it's like that time of year again, when the alarm clock goes off and then fucking Theon goes, oh, time to write that Faker article again. Like when he comes and does it, he always makes this mistake. He always starts the story with the game where he kills Ambition because it was the first game he played at LCK. Dude, I always told him this. Right after that, he literally plays LeBlanc hard carries against his future fucking rival, Easy Who. Like that's the game you want to start with, mate.
Doesn't he get like
11 kills in that.
So
Ridiculous.
this
Just
is
styles on the entire map.
This is to describe this to you guys. You can look at it. You can look for it.
It's
on
one of the
my
most
Twitter.
biggest stomps you'll ever see from
It is.
that way.
It is an extremely famous game. Because at that point in time, now you'll look at it now, you'll be like, "Wow, this is normal LeBlanc play," but it wasn't at the time. It was not.
No.
It was crazy at the time.
He made it like a solo queue game where like you have someone smurfing and they just take over the whole map and everyone's just like scared in the lane. It's ridiculous.
So
it's mad entertaining though. It's on YouTube.
What happens in this game is that he's playing against MVP Blue. Now, this is the team that goes on to become Samsung Blue and includes Easy Hoon, Acorn, who else? Heart, and Deft. And so the only player you don't know is their support player named Flom, because Hart was playing jungle at the time. So these are players who would go on to become extremely good. And in this game, he plays LeBlanc, and this is like broken Deathfire Grasp, and there's the MVP Blue support Flom is on Zyra, and he's basically just getting one shot by this LeBlanc. And
by the way, when you just said Deathfire Grasp, so many non-mid players got like a fucking chill go up there. Like, oh shit, I forgot that existed. Oh my god.
Thank God.
Thank God they take care of us now and remove the item from the game. That was some bullshit item.
Yeah, so it was a bullshit item. So my point is that they surrender in 20 minutes in this game.
Reasonable. So 20 minutes surrender, of course.
Like by the end of this 20-minute game, Faker is literally just solo comboing their support from outside of Fog of War, and like they just can't play League of Legends. And so I have a video coming up in a couple days that talks about how Riot has sort of moved their balancing from like individual carry play at the professional level into team play. And then I talk about how it's likely to be, I hope it's going to be different with Valorant, but we won't get into why I think that it's a much easier to balance Valorant for those reasons. Instead, let's talk about like how these changes came around for League of Legends, because part of it was like removing DFG was like, part of it for sure. In terms of individual carry. But here, there are a bunch of other factors, like passive gold was increased massively so that supports would have items so they wouldn't die. Vision was changed to not cost money so that supports and junglers weren't using all their gold on wards so they could buy items that would allow them to not die. Because back in the day, if you start to fall behind, passive gold was so low and you had to spend all your money on wards that you literally just couldn't buy items not to get just like one shot by a giga-fed assassin. Also, just in general, more wards means that the more ahead you are, the more information you have, so Faker can just all-in you at any time because he knows exactly that you're not going to kill him. And there's also very little risk because there weren't gold bounties, so even if he does die, does it fucking matter? Not really. So there's all these different factors that allowed individual carry play to occur at the time. And so Riot just sort of has chipped away at that. And I think like you're now seeing the other side of that spectrum, which goes back to why FPX won Worlds, why Cloud9's playstyle is so effective, especially now, because guess what? If you take Dragon, all the Dragon Souls, four dragons by 25 minutes into the game, your entire team gets that buff. So you're basically distributing this power in the.
We're heroes of the storm now, boys. We're heroes of the storm.
Basically, like that's not a joke. Like if
it's like that, yeah.
Why Heroes of the Storm was a shit esport was because there wasn't enough individual carry. You couldn't have star players because everything was distributed evenly across all the players. So it was really hard for somebody to like make a name for themselves. Like if you want proof of this, look at the fact that the All-Pro team was all Cloud9 players. That's like a legit vote. And you know what? I can't even really argue with that. Honestly, I can't. Like, you might say, well, Power of Evil someday might have been in, no offense, Licorice, might have been in consideration.
I'd have probably put someday, I'm not lying.
Anyway, I think you did a good job of dumpstering Sunday on your own, by the way, in this playoff series. So that was a good vote of confidence for you, Licorice. But my point is that like,
I mean, swap teams. Let's see. What? So give it a go. You think you're better? Swap teams.
Anyway, I think what's so interesting about that though is that this is the first time where I've ever thought maybe there isn't a compelling argument for this not to be the case, because the game is so team focused right now that it's really hard to suggest other players. And I think personally for me, League has gone too far in that direction. Like the game with Faker, I used as an example because it was clear that that's like unacceptable. Like, you know, literally not being able to play League of Legends against Faker was not good for the professional scene, because the balance you're trying to strike at all times is, should we take the game and say, okay, well, we're just gonna have these players hard carry. In my opinion, there should be a way for strong team play, if you focus on a star player, to be able to out strategize them without just getting put in the dumpster. So I just feel like this is all to say, I think we've gone too far the other direction right now. And people will say, like, oh yeah, well, this Shy or Rookie or these guys can still carry, but they really can't. Not in the way that it was possible.
Also, don't use mad outliers like that. Like, I'm just going to pick the top 5 players to ever play the game. Look, they can do it. Why can't you, guy in LCS? Because I'm not the fucking top 5 player of all time. Like, it's not really a reasonable standard to hold, is it?
What are your guys' thoughts on this? The state of teamwork in the game right
Like,
now?
put it this way, do you like where the game's at now?
I think that there's a really fine line that needs to be like ridden when it comes to this type of thing. Because I was playing competitively back in season 3 when this better mid, better top, better X wins basically can 1v9 was around, and it basically, because when I was a jungler, it basically just defined my role as, I am mid lane, you know, woof. If the mid laner, I cannot feed my mid laner, I will not win the game. And this kind of just became the game plan. And I was scrimming with players like Nuke Duck before they went into the LCS with Lemon Dog, and it was basically just, I play Jarvan, I go mid level 3, I get him a kill, I give him all my buffs, and he carries me. Like, this is kind of how the game had to be played. And I think that if you're not a mid laner and not an AD carry, the game is much better for you to play now. But if you are a mid laner or an AD carry right now, it might feel a bit worse when you have a ton of resources and cannot carry the game. So it's like you're basically thinning the line between either making every role legit be able to 1v9, in which case you have awful balance in solo queue, or giving it to some roles, like it was just mid and top to some extent, and then making all other roles much less relevant or much more relegated to be like basically dogs for their team, or make a game where it's like completely team based, where there are so few wards for each team that every vision setup needs to be contested as a team, and prios and wave management are more important. It's like, if you compare what it is now to what it was before, I know a lot of people say, oh, I miss it when you can 1v9. It's like, yeah, if you were a mid laner, you sure miss it. I don't really.
Sure. I mean, you're hitting on it, because, like, obviously the average player doesn't want to be stuck in a situation where, you know, support, they're just getting one shot of support. Like, I'm not saying it's bad for the game, but it's also extremely difficult. I mean, honestly, the thing I would get rid of is bounties, because the problem with bounties is that it's in my opinion, an unnecessary rubber band mechanic. And it's almost like when a player is doing well, what you want to see is for them to just like continue to take risks.
You want them to push the envelope,
push
exactly,
the advantage.
yes.
And it just makes them cowards. It makes them pussies. Like, it's a bad mechanic. I would love for that to go away. And especially the fact that you don't even have to get kills for it. You could just out farm somebody, and then all of a sudden
that's the weirdest one, isn't it? That's one area that I don't like. Here's the thing: whether we have bounties entirely or not is a different discussion than why bounties exist for like lane differences. That's the one I've never understood, because I've seen some really weird like I've seen where that's basically made the game so that like you shouldn't kill or should kill a person at times that don't make sense in the game.
I don't know about that. I just think that bounties are not explained properly. So it's like sometimes I can be 0-2 in a lane and have 150 gold bounty. I'm like, how the fuck do I have this bounty on me? It's like, they're not properly explained, or
that is basically what I just said, but keep going.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all right.
All right, Licorice. Like, how do you feel about this change? Because you've seen this change of the way the game is balanced for teamwork or single player, like single carry performances over your career.
I really like the game right now. Like,
Shocking.
Like,
man who wins everything loves game.
I mean, I really enjoy it. I think that like everyone has more impact than they used to, where like before it was like your mid laner's really fed, so just like follow your mid laner around and he'll carry you 1v9. And that was like the kind of the solo queue playstyle. But now I think that like everyone has agency and that your decisions matter more in game. So I really enjoy it.
I mean, I like I'm not saying I dislike the game right now, and I don't think that it's gone so far in the teamwork direction as we used to see, like with this game that I'm talking about with Faker back in the day. So I'm enjoying it, but I do wonder if it could just be like, I feel like it's like a couple tweaks from being in like the best place ever.
Well, the question here, Monty, is like you set it up there as though it's in like the worst position now.
Sorry.
It's still obviously slightly better than a couple of years back, right? Like
Yes.
the extremes of
No,
where
no,
Korea got
no,
when
no.
Samsung Galaxy won Worlds or whatever the fuck. That was like the darkest day ever for me.
Yes, no. It's in a. I actually think the game's in a pretty good spot right now. I just think it's a little bit overtuned towards the team play side. The example I was giving is not one that I'm saying I liked with Faker. I was like, this is such an extreme example, but we never had that example before Faker showed up. Because Faker showed that was possible and no one else was. So definitely more of an outlier. But yeah, I'm not advocating to go back to that, to be very clear.
I think that in pro play, the game is in a much better spot than it was in many other seasons. However, for like the average player, like talking about like more solo queue, it's not in a really great spot. Because my main issue, and I think I've talked about this a lot, is that I don't like, right? This is the one thing I don't like, is that you can have more impact on the game playing bad than you can have playing good. And I think that's the biggest issue with League right now, is that if you are playing really, really well and doing a lot and like really dominating your position on the map, but one person is not playing good and he's playing so bad, he doesn't even have to play at the same like bad level to your good level. He can just play like a little bad and you are fucked. You can't do nothing. I think that's really, really bad. I think that you should, if you're playing that well, be able to actually like, okay, I am dragging you with me, you know, like, unless the guy's legit like 0-15 when you're like 2-0.
Basically, like, it's easier for someone to throw the game than it is for you to carry the game in that sense.
Yeah,
right?
I do agree with that.
Yeah, I get what you mean on that. Yeah.
But yeah,
any thoughts, Licorice?
On that, I don't know. I mean, for me, when I play solo queue, I try not to focus on winning. So it's kind of like the total opposite end of.
All right, fucking Zen Monkov. It's like the problem with your problem, Grasshopper, is you grasp at winning, and therefore it slips through your fingers. What are you talking about? This guy's like Reaper's done a number on this. I don't know, man.
Licorice is sitting there. He's like, the problem with going 18-0 is that trying to win was never really our goal.
Exactly.
I do appreciate that mentality, but
no, it's good. It just sounded like so cheesy.
It's the right approach.
I get what he means.
It's the correct approach. He's going the right way.
We agree. It's just funny. It's just funny when he just says it multiple times in every situation. Is that what Reaper is teaching you right now?
It's cool. You're best.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to like make an argument for it for me because I just like haven't thought about it. Like I actively try not to think about it. Like that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
This is the Cloud9 strategy. Is it's so big brain. Someone in America finally figured this out. Are you ready? This groundbreaking piece of information. Scrims don't fucking matter. Winning scrims does not matter. That has been the NA curse forever, guys, especially international events. Having been to so many international events in League of Legends and talking to the players, and they're all like, we beat this Korean team, or we beat this team. We're going to do great.
Meanwhile, the big fish stories are outrageous in League of Legends.
It's so funny.
Because the worst thing is, you'll be the teams that would never beat them in a real game. Like, you literally hear like the third seed from NA, like, we took a game off like fucking IG. It's like, who cares? It was a fucking scream, you idiot. Shut up.
So here's like the best example of like a situation where I knew something that was going on. Now, hilariously, they ended up actually losing at the time, but at IEM, the one that TSM won, actually, and the one that the Coup Tigers famously, like, threw. So, hilariously, Hojin, the player, famous for never playing Nidalee. So, I was at this IEM, and I'm literally standing behind them watching them scrim. And Hojin's playing Nidalee, and I'm just like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, first time Nidalee. And he's just like feeding and laughing his ass off. And then I go and like talk to TSM later, and they're like, we beat the Coup Tigers. And I was like, oh my God. Like, you guys, like, you actually have no clue what was going on. It was so funny. Now, they did end up trolling their way with Kuro and Ayas. They did troll in that tournament.
The problem is they trolled in the actual third game. Second game, actually.
So they were trolling in scrims, and then also trolling against WE at the time when Kuro was like playing Yasuo and doing all this really stupid shit. So they did end up losing, and TSM did end up winning. But that just goes to show the mentality difference that exists between a lot of teams. So I appreciate that you're actually using scrims in practice, and I guess even LCS teams, once you've secured your playoff spot, for what you should be using them for, which is actual, diversification of your strategies.
Yeah, like improvement. Like improvement's always more than like actually. I mean, winning is awesome, and I also want to point out that we win the vast majority of our scrims.
Yeah, of course.
But like it's not the goal. The goal is always to get better.
Here's the thing, Licorice. And the reason why I totally can fuck with this mentality is because basically it's something that I a long time heard, and it always stuck with me. It's like the reason why you don't focus on winning is because winning is actually the product of what you're doing, not the goal. So as in, if you just make all the best decisions and you play the most perfect, you will win, obviously. Like that just makes sense, doesn't it? You don't need to reach for it in that sense. If you do all the correct things at the end of the game, if you're the better player, obviously, you win the game in theory.
Yeah, I think the best way that I've ever heard it put was that every team and every player has the same goal, and their goal is to win. So obviously it can't be the goal that like separates the winners from the losers, because everyone has the exact same goal. So it has to be something else. And
that's how you go about it, surely. Yeah.
Focus on. Yeah.
It's really easy to say I want to win. It's really difficult to like not think about winning and think about like what it takes to actually do well. I think that's something that TSM do really well, like where they try to diversify their playstyle. The thing that they don't really do well is get better or actually win. So like as soon as they get better at doing that, surely they'll be fine.
I mean, to be fair, historically it has been an issue for TSM to improve because whoever their coach is immediately gets, benched in favor of Reginald whenever the team starts doing badly. So the problem that TSM, this doesn't happen anymore, by the way, but historically, one of the issues is like, so if you're going to try and get better, sometimes you have to lose. However, on TSM, when you start to lose, you get replaced as a coach.
I mean, when you say it doesn't happen anymore, it just hasn't had a chance yet to. It was happening last year, even still with Reggie. You have to understand, the only learning that happens in TSM is when Reggie comes in with the belt. Like, you got to learn today, boy. Like, that's it. That's the end of the split. Like, that's the only learning that's done.
So, like, I think that they've had a structural issue where they haven't been able to necessarily have the leeway to fix their problems because it's always just patching it up as quickly as possible. Otherwise, Reggie comes in and takes over. So,
by the way, we should actually talk a little bit about TSM because, listen, I know I don't want to spoil the whole playoffs for you, but they're going to dumpster that lower bracket. Those teams are all fucking bad. So we may as well discuss them because hopefully they'll be playing later in the tournament. Like, what do you guys think of TSM?
I like them, honestly. I actually really like watching how they play, besides their last weeks, which weren't so great. But overall, throughout the split, I actually really like the way that they're playing, and I think that they have made huge improvements.
I agree.
And like huge progress in creating a situation in which all their players can succeed in, and also opening up different players to carry, like letting BB carry on the when they put Ornn mid and set like Kiana top and just like hard dough for Kiana. And I also think that Cobb and Biofrost are a really good bot lane. Like that's like the weirdest combination of players I never thought would work, but actually works super well.
Do you think that they're your biggest rival for the playoffs, or is it EG, Licorice?
The scary thing about TSM, I think, is that like the level of talent they have is actually really, really high for the LCS. And I think that talent-wise, they would probably be like our biggest opposition in playoffs. But I think that this whole split, they've been kind of shaky on the teamwork side. So I'm kind of waiting to see in their match against 100 Thieves, just like how they look. Like, do they, like if they came together as a team, then I think that they're a really scary opponent. And if they didn't, then I think that they might even just lose and be knocked out of the tournament right away.
Yeah, they definitely don't hit their potential. I mean, everyone's seen it. Like, how many times have they had the games that, with the player talent they have, you think this game's over already, and then you turn away for 5 minutes to make a cup of tea, and they've lost the fucking game?
I do think, though, that they're probably better in a best of 5 because they still do have off games, right? Like, they...
I mean, they lost to Dig at the end of the fucking split, which is almost like...
They went 0-2. They lost 100 to 100 Thieves as well, right?
That takes a lot to lose to both those teams in 1 week.
So, but I do think that if you give them a 5-game series, that they would even know. I mean, my complaint about TSM is it feels like they don't know what their team identity is. Like they were sometimes going for, they hadn't like nailed down a style or a kind of composition that they like to use. Like they'd go from running more standard comps to like running global comps and then failing with those and then going back. So I feel like they don't even really know who they are. But I think over the course of a series, they would be able to adjust to what was working for them on that day. That would be my theory.
Yeah.
Right, Brokenshard. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Licorice.
I mean, I was just gonna say that like I could totally see that happening, and I could also see it not happening. Like I don't know. They're like a total question mark to me right now. So I'm just waiting to see what happens.
Right, Brokenshard, being as obviously Licorice might have to play them and don't want to give too much away, blah blah blah. Probably secret scrim partners. I'm sure that Jack Reggie alliance still, you know, they have the underground shit where they all pretend they're not actually just still the same team. Right, Brokenshard, give me your thoughts though. Like we've basically set the table here. Obviously, they have a load of talent in TSM. What do you think their identity should be? Like, how would you, if you were taking over this team now, you were trying to win this playoffs? What would you change?
I was just taking a look real quick at like the drafting that they did from week 6 to week 9, and they basically went from a week where they beat C9 and FlyQuest to losing to IMT 100 Thieves and Dignitas. And I think that the way that I would draft if I was TSM is give Bjergsen as much agency as possible.
May as well be Reginald.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Danish Reginald.
Yeah. Giving Bjergsen the most agency when it comes to picking the most impactful mid laner for the game. In one situation, it was Zilean. It was a perfect pick for the draft and set up the Jarvan set super well. In the game right after where they beat FlyQuest, it was Aurelia. Like, I've only heard about Bjergsen's Aurelia in scrims from people who scrimmed against it. I've never actually really seen it. I'm not sure if he's really played it before, but he's so fucking good at it.
Dude, someone made this point the other day, and it was so well phrased because you know, obviously, that like it's when I had Acadian on the Crackdown like last week or whatever, right? You know, obviously, everyone knows the narrative of like TSM makes all the junglers passive and breaks them all. Someone made a point where they said, being as now like they've had Dardoch and actually at times Acadian looked fine being aggressive. It's like they said that narrative actually is less important than the narrative of how does TSM make Bjergsen more passive? How do they make him sort of ruined? Because I agree, like I've seen so many times where they almost use Bjergsen as the fucking band-aid in the draft. It's like, dude, that's the best player on the team. Like he's the mid laner as well. Like you're saying, give him the impact champion. He'll carry the whole game.
I think the way that draft works now is that if your top laner is really competent, you're mostly fine blind picking a lot of like the power picks, right? Or an Aatrox set. They're all really blindable champions and all have good impact. Like Broken Blade set is really good. So I would like to see a draft in which they do that early pick a scaling bot lane, and then just give Bjergsen the most impactful champion for the game, whatever that is, because you already know that Bjergsen can literally play everything. He can literally play everything. Akali, Aurelia, Zilean the next game. Give him impact. I'm not necessarily making him the carry player, but give him the champion that will most impact the game, whatever that may be, and then you'll probably win. Give setup to Broken Blade, give scaling to bot lane, and then give Dardoch and Bjergsen the best combo that you can have, and then you'll probably win. And then free up Broken Blade. Like go from mid to top, and then you win, literally, if you're TSM.
You have any thoughts on TSM there, Licorice?
In line with that, though, shout out to when TSM made Bjergsen play Maokai. that was basically what I was talking about. Please don't ever do that again.
This is what I'm talking about, them not having an identity, though. Like, just the weird choices that they make. It's like they don't know how they're going to play themselves.
Can I interject real quickly before we go into Licorice?
Yeah.
What if Bjergsen's ability to play so many champions is also impacting them? Like, he can say, I can play Maokai, but should he play Maokai? Like, yeah, Bjergsen will play these champions, and then, like, your team sucks, you know? Like, maybe his ability to literally just be able to play so many things is actually making TSM look so hit and miss because they try to diversify, but they just don't hit the mark.
Well, it's also that Bjergsen is just a very agreeable human being, so that's really on the coaches. Because I'm sure what he's saying, knowing him, is that he's like, oh, well, I can play this if you want it, coach, or like, if you guys have this strategy, I'll do that. Because he is honestly a team-first player.
Yeah, but that could be a problem if you're the best player. Like sometimes you have to say, give it the fucking ball.
Yeah, if anything, I think he should be asserting himself more and being like, all right, everybody just have faith in Bjergsen right now. We're doing it my way.
It's like this quote. I don't know if everyone heard this. It was a fucking sick anecdote where at Kobe Bryant's memorial, Shaq told a story that back in the day in the Lakers, when they played together in the early 2000s, some of the players came to Shaq and they were like, oh, Kobe doesn't pass the ball. So he was like, I'll talk to him. It's all right. And he goes and talks to him and he says to him, Kobe, there's no I in team. And he goes, yeah, but there's an M-E in that motherfucker, and just walked off. And then Shaq had to basically tell those players, like, yeah, he's not passing, just rebound it. Like, I don't want that every game, obviously, because then you become forgiven. But, like, do it every now and then.
So your thoughts on TSM, Licorice? Obviously not spoiling anything that you may have in store for them.
I mean, just as a play style, like, they play around BB a lot. It seems like it works sometimes it doesn't work. Bjergsen kind of just plays, like, whatever he thinks is going to set up his team comp the best, but it doesn't always work out. Like, I think you guys kind of nailed it.
Let's talk about EG, who's going to be your next opponent here, because I thought it was interesting that in that series, the more they, like, their entire draft was sort of revolving around trying to get high mobility ults like Ryze and Talia and Tom Kench to sort of and Pantheon to make global plays, which reminded me a lot of how G2 was actually playing at the end of the regular split, and being very successful. So in a way, how can I put this? That style of play is sort of the cheat way to do what FPX and Cloud9 do, which is like, well, you can't make the timings by having smart play across the map. So you add global ultimates instead in order just to, sort of short circuit that approach and be able to get into the side lanes quickly for a lot of dives. But I thought EG was pretty successful at it, especially when we saw the kind of like Talia Pantheon game come out and they were effective at diving the turret. And I think Jizuke is at his best when he is sort of unleashed on the map as a player.
Yeah, I think versus EG, the main thing to worry about is just like who's going to have agency in the game. And I think that going into draft, we want to make sure that we have like the tools to either have better split push or be able to just win lane and win the game that way. Because with the like global ult, like Talia Pantheon kind of combos, if you fall behind, like they are in control of the game and you're just sitting there and waiting for them to mess up. Like, and you just like, you don't really have decisions at that point. Like in the game versus FlyQuest, like FlyQuest was able to get back in the game, but that's just because EG wasn't actually like playing it that well in the Talia Pantheon game they played. So like for us going into the game, it's just like trying to make sure that we are able to be in the driver's seat from like a draft perspective, and also just like how we're going to play the game.
I don't think to be fair, that game that you played against them towards the end of the split though, like that just looked like you could just do anything in the draft that you wanted. That was ridiculous. Remember the one I'm talking about? The one where it was like Jizuke was on, what was it? Kale, and then it was Niski on mid. You were on fucking Quinn, mate. Like, is that a meta champion? Have I been missing something?
I mean, Quinn was a counter pick for Nectin at Worlds, and it's something that like players just haven't pulled out. I think it's quite good. Like, I don't think that in any of our games this split that we actually played something that we didn't think was good. Like, we never tried a pick. Like, we weren't like, oh, we're gonna have fun this game. It was always like, okay, I think this strategy could be good. And like, this is how we're going to set it up, and like, let's do it. So like, I don't know. I really liked that game, actually.
I think one of the most impressive things about Cloud9 is that you always have everyone on the team has very clear knowledge of their win conditions. And I think that's what, to me, makes it so likely that you guys would do very well on the professional stage, is that everyone knows what the win conditions are, and you move almost in unison, like perfectly in some of these team fights, knowing which abilities are up and what the enemy's goals are, and you can re-engage if you see them make a mistake so easily. How is that actually being communicated amongst you guys right now? Like, are you setting up those win conditions at the start of the game?
A lot of it just comes from like trust. I want to say, like, I think every player knows their champion and knows what their champion is trying to do in game. Like, if Blabber's playing Gragas, he wants to like get a big flank or get a big engage, or like when his cooldowns are up, he knows he can go in and there's like not a lot of counterplay because Gragas E is kind of a broken spell. So I think like when Blabber says like I'm gonna go for Quinn or something, then like everyone just follows up because we all trust each other. And I think that it's really just as simple as that.
Really easy to trust each other when you're 17-1, just saying.
Yeah, the doubt hasn't crept into your minds yet. That's true. As
It is, but at the same time, it's also easier to go 17-1 if you trust each other. See? I'm going to teach you, Brokenshard. Come before me, disciple Brokenshard.
It's just the Zen koan
Exactly.
show today.
Exactly.
Expanding people's minds through League of Legends philosophy. So
Zen and the Art of Draft Maintenance. That can be the name of this episode.
I do think it's like the thing about EG is I'm not sure they can win without that style. So I'm going to be very curious to see what your guys' drafts are when you head into that series. Since you can't talk much about it, let's talk about the matchup that's going to happen later today, which is FlyQuest versus Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians looking better. Is this because they're online? Has Golden Glue been unlocked by not having to literally walk into an arena?
Does the Scrim God walk among us mortals?
I don't know. I think we'll have to wait and see today. I just think that there aren't very many Scrim Gods that play against us in Scrims, so it's always hard to know like how strong the other teams are, like from our perspective. Really.
Translation: we don't practice Golden Guardians. Why the fuck would we?
No comment from him.
His talent says it all. You don't need to answer
Yeah, the
that.
best thing about having Licorice on here is watching him just like smirk and knowing that he's just sublimating the toxicity within himself. He's been trained well, but it's all over your face sometimes. Anyway, do you guys have a winner here? I mean, this should go to FlyQuest. Like Golden Guardians can't just be allowed to win this series.
I really hope they play solo. Like, I really, really hope that they play solo.
They must. I mean, come on.
I think if they don't play solo, they're full trolling. Solo will probably deal with GG really well, I think. Golden Guardians, not necessarily Golden Glue. And I don't think that, Golden Glue's probably playing a bit better. Like, we talked about how good Power Evil was. That's probably going to be, like, the big, major, like, turning point in the strength of...
I mean, the best players on that team, though, is top and jungle, surely.
Yes.
Like, that team's all about Closer and Haunter.
Am I wrong? I've been really impressed with Closer this year.
Yeah, Closer's really good.
I think he's been super good, actually, and it makes you wonder what other diamonds in the rough are out there when no one ever focuses on importing players from certain regions like Turkey. But yeah, Closer, I think that he has been one of the most pleasant surprises in LCS this year.
Closer's really good. I also think that FlyQuest have a good matchup against Golden Guardians because I think if Solo's playing, your weakest point on FlyQuest is your bot lane. I think FlyQuest bot lane is really bad, honestly.
You can survive against GGS, though, right?
And GG's bot lane is really, really bad. So it's maybe like a lot worse, Like, I don't rate them at all. It's legit going to be solo Santorin PoE against Haunter, Closer, Golden Glue. And while Closer is like better in the skill department, I think that both of FlyQuest solo laners are, from what I saw of Solo, he looks better than Haunter. But Haunter obviously has much more experience and he has had moments. I also just think that Haunter is like what Licorice said about Viper kind of needing resources. Haunter, like if you don't play around Haunter, he ints. So it's actually just going to be top lane. And if Solo is really, really good at sponging up the pressure, then Golden Guardians don't really have a win condition here, actually, in this matchup.
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I think this is a sentence that we can say in 2020. I think the premier matchup in this is Santorin versus Closer.
Right, that's it. Shut the show down. Last one out of someone in Insight. Turn the lights off. We don't need to do this anymore, Monty. We've degraded ourselves enough. Money isn't worth it. Like, fuck it out. That's
no,
it's true though. I actually will say one of the things over the years, from when Santorin was almost a meme on TSM, I've actually been quite impressed with how he's developed his game.
He's actually been really good this year,
and he now looks like a player who. The difference was another reason I thought he was a meme in TSM is he also played like he had no confidence in that team, and he was just a dog. Now he actually plays like a confident, like he knows what he's doing, knows where he is on the map, seems to control the game pretty well. I think he's actually become a pretty legit player. Respect.
I think Santorin's actually really good.
Has it been a challenge for you to play against Closer or Santorin?
Me? No, not really.
Well, not Brokenshard, for fuck's sake. Yeah, obviously.
I know Brokenshard was a jungler at one point in time.
It's kind of you to pretend like he's a pro player as well, but he knows that the horse is bolted on that one. There's no point shutting the stable door now.
I'm never coming back to play again. Don't you worry, Licorice.
You're
You don't have
safe.
to deal with that, please.
All right. That's good to
No,
know.
Santorin's improved a lot. I always thought Santorin was a fine player, but he's developed to be more than a fine player. He's just not the kind of player that's going to like pop off and hard carry your games, but I think that's fine from a jungler, honestly. Whereas Closer, I think when I actually briefly coached Closer, like really long time ago in 2017, I was trying out for a team he was on. And he looked really shit. I'm not gonna lie. Him and Broken Blade were on that team. And they both looked really bad. Broken Blade much less. But when throughout the year when he was playing with the different mid laners and under like Royal, he just became more confident and more aggressive. I think that it's really nice that he's bringing that to, because at least in the past, NA junglers were really passive, and he can actually compete with some of the best. So if Closer kind of gets in the zone and gets in a good flow, he actually can dominate the matchup. I just think he doesn't have the laners to facilitate it in the specific matchup.
Well, do you want to talk about some LEC? Take a quick break. I know you have to go soon, Licorice, right?
Yep, I should get going. I have to go improve a little bit in some scrims today.
Nice.
Not winning.
Not against Golden Guardians. Not even playing them in the playoffs, I'll bet. So.
Don't have to worry about them. You're gonna run out of scrim partners real quick though. It's always hard at the end of the season because everybody just leaves as soon as they lose, so you just have no one to practice with by the time you get to the finals, right?
Yeah, I mean, it basically turns into like either you scrim your academy team or you don't scrim, and that's pretty much it. Those are your options. So.
Well, fortunately, your academy team is actually doing pretty well right now.
Yeah, it's true. Our academy team is actually pretty good, and also this year with the new format, because the losers bracket final is like the day before. There's actually like you could just scrim both teams and like show some strategies to some
That's
teams,
good.
show some strategies to the other teams. So you do have some options going into going towards finals this time.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be the preferred scrim partner for both of those teams. One would assume, but yeah,
because they don't want to scrim each other. So,
yeah, that's a huge advantage. Actually,
By the way, I'll give you. Here's another angle, Monty, I just thought of now as well, is that will also be something that teams are going to have to now adjust to, which is that in the past, if we're on the bracket, right, I scrim against you, and it's like, yeah, if you win your match, I might have to play you later in the tournament. But in this scenario, you can go to the low bracket and I have to play you still anyway. So actually, we're going to get matches now where people have not only either literally played the team in the playoffs, but scrimmed against them way more likely than you would have in the past, because you would only play like 3 teams before, obviously. So you would actually get way less experience of knowing where those teams are at in the playoffs. So everyone should be pretty well versed by the end of this.
Actually, before you go, Licorice, I got one more thing I want to talk to you about. Has there been any difference for you in terms of playing online matches? Like, I know you have a pretty... You have a pre-game ritual that you go through, and it's obviously super different just to be playing your games like you would in your scrim environment, because it's hard to get over that psychologically that these games actually matter. I mean, as much as you can try and tell yourself that, your brain doesn't really work that way. How has that been? Has it been more of a challenge? Because you guys looked very clean in your playoff match, so looked pretty much the same.
It's been something that we've been working on since week 8, basically, when we first started playing online. And I think that like in week 8 and 9, we actually looked pretty shaky. And like we've been trying to figure out like exactly how we want game day to look like when it's not going to the studio and your schedule is set for you. And I think that we've actually done like a really good job. We have like a different setup that we play at only for matches now. And like I think we've done a really good job, and I think that for me personally, like I've like adjusted my ritual, and I think that I actually did an excellent job of doing it before the 100 Thieves game. So I'm feeling really good about it.
Are you guys using like a different facility right now? I actually don't know.
What?
Are you using
like
a
you don't play
facility?
from home, right? You play at some specific location. He's asking like separate to where you practice.
Yeah. So basically, because of the like COVID, we had like teams that were supposed to move into.
Oh, you're using the Dota house, aren't you?
Yeah, we're using the Dota house.
Right. Okay.
Got it. Okay. So you're actually, so the Dota house is close to your house, and so you just walk over there and play there.
Yeah, pretty much. That's it exactly.
Got it. That's actually a very smart use of that facility. I think it probably does make a pretty big difference for you guys. Does it make it feel more real?
I think it's nice just to like have it be different. Like I know that like there's a lot of research that tells you that like people are very like location based for like habits and how they act. So I can't say that I like notice it all too much personally, but I'm sure that it makes a difference.
It's the reason why, famously, like working from home can be a trap, because then people just are in the same vibe as when they're at home. So it's the reason why, actually, if you ever look into it, a lot of like authors and writers specifically go to a specific coffee shop just to write at that time, because you want to put your brain in a different mode. That was something I was wondering about, actually. Forget all the thing of like pressure and LAN and all that. Part of the build up to playing the game is like you go to the studio together, you have that meeting together. It's like it is all part of the atmosphere that you're building, whereas you don't really get that if you all just you wake up and you just go to the PC and play at home. It won't feel like the same gravitas to the game, I imagine.
Also, some of the teams are playing from their individual apartments. Like, they're not even in the same room, right?
Hopefully they don't make the same mistake as Dapper did on Flashpoint, where in the background of the camera shot, there's a bong and a bottle of lotion. So all I'm going to say is maybe he likes herbal incense, and I don't know, maybe his hands just get very dry and ashy. I don't know. Not a good look.
That was, well...
It was funny, at least. Yeah.
It was a good look for
the joke came on to you. In future episodes, we should start planting more and more ridiculous stuff behind them.
And look, I've got a green screen. I can put literally anything behind
exactly.
me.
So he's got like a depleted uranium bomb behind him, or sort of ticking down, and sort of, just to get as silly as we could, see if people spot all the Easter eggs.
Would be good. All right. Well, thank you. We're going to take a quick break, guys, and when we come back, we will be talking about a bunch of other stuff about LEC and maybe about some format stuff if we feel like it, but plenty more content on the way, and we'll see you guys in...
But don't go just because Licorice is going to be gone. Like, Brokenshard will step his game up in the second half, I promise. Like, listen, he's been...
Brokenshard, you've been great. Come
until
on,
now.
Come on. Brokenshard's been great.
Just
come on,
harmless banter.
We got to talk about this G2 loss, which is just...
Yes, of course. There's going to be some hilarious shit to talk about. Don't worry.
There's tons of good stuff. And thanks for joining us, Licorice. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Howdy there, buckaroos and buckarettes. Welcome to another edition of the Cloud9 Roundup, your source for all Cloud9 news and information. Now, you're here watching the 9 Summon and Insight, presented by AT&T, so you already know that Cloud9 demolished 100 Thieves in their first series in the LCS playoffs, 3-0. And you may think that score is one-sided? Well, you didn't see the games, because it was even more one-sided than you might believe. It was a complete stomp, and our mid laner Niski, well, he took home the player of the series with some impressive Zoe work. Now, of course, you may have also seen the 2020 LCS Spring All-Pro team. Do you know how many Cloud9 players were on it? Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but all 5 players on Cloud9. Licorice, Blabber, Niski, Sven, and Vulcan. They just completed the sweep of our players' all-pro team. Great work, and we'll see you in the next round of the LCS playoffs. It's time to talk a little bit about Fortnite. It's been week 3 of the Fortnite Championship Series Finals, and Drakens placed 6th place with 38 points, and Nyx in 37th place with 12 points. Session 2 ended with Nyx in 9th place, Blackouts in 62nd place, and Drakens in 87th place. Session 1 ended with Blackouts in 7th place, Drakens in 183rd, and Nyx in 266th. So good work overall to our Fortnite players. In Cash Cup Duos, also in Fortnite, Blackouts placed 1st place with 127 points, Nyx 4th, and Drakens 26th. Now, it may be hard to crack the top of the table, but we had some strong finishers in Fortnite. It's a great time to watch Cloud9 Counter-Strike, not only because we've seen a 1st place finish in Phase 1 for Cloud9, and now a 2nd place finish in Phase 2 after they lost 0-2 to Havu, but because yours truly is hosting over there at Flashpoint. And not only that, we are moving into our playoffs. Cloud9 is in the upper part of the bracket. We'll be double elimination, so plenty more matches for those Cloud9 boys to try and take home that first Flashpoint trophy. We'll be seeing them just later this week as they do their first playoff battle. Now, you might have heard of this game called Valorant. You might want to check out a very educational and entertaining streamer from Cloud9, PvPX. He'll be streaming some Valorant beta now starting today. If you're watching the Cloud9 Summon and Insight right now, will be Tuesday the 7th. Also had some streams and some content made last week. Also, Montecristo, yours truly? Well, I'll be streaming some Valorant as well and answering all your questions about how it might shape up to be a top esport. Not only that, but if you're watching this stream, you may have seen some Dungeons & Dragons. During this pandemic, a lot of those Cloud9 people are coming together and playing some D&D on this stream. We'll be building out the Cloud9 stream with even more content in the future. So why don't you go ahead and hit that follow button on Twitch or that subscribe button on YouTube. There's never been a better time. That's it for this week's version of the Cloud9 Roundup. Now we're going to get back to regular Monty and Thorin.
All right, welcome back. You guys got a little preview there of Brokenshard asking if it was fine. It was fine. I'm too lazy to fix Thorin's Twitter. So it's just the one with the
doesn't matter. Every single one of you follows me anyway. Stop pretending like you do. That's one of those things, by the way, that I will never let any fan gaslight me. Where they try to say I'm bad at Twitter, the numbers speak for themselves, bitch. Just sit down. Sit down.
All right, let's talk about LEC, where the good teams that aren't Cloud9 are. Shocking upset. G2 losing to Mad Lions. Looked like a very online game of League of Legends. So I did bring up on Twitter that this is one of those things that, frankly, League of Legends fans aren't used to because we haven't had professional games online since 2012, basically. So people don't really understand that there is a difference between online and LAN play. And I love these League of Legends fans. Stop trying to diminish their accomplishments. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying that there's going to be differences, and that's why I brought it up with Licorice at the end there, was because it's important to have these kind of rituals, because psychologically, if I just sit down in my scrim computer, my brain, my reaction is going to be, this is a scrim. And you can tell yourself that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your brain is going to cooperate with you, because if you think you're in complete control of your mind, well, buddy, you got something coming. You got a lot to learn about life.
You're lost than all of us, but that way, exactly. Yeah, you're in the Matrix still.
Are you Buddha? Like,
because here's the thing, Monty. This actually, I can actually speak to this in as much as Counter-Strike, obviously, not just literally because of now, but to this day has always had an online component. And I can tell you that when we used to have the ESL Pro League was played online in the same time as we had this really big LAN circuit, it was actually infamous that the teams that qualified to the LAN finals of the tournament from the online portion would never be like the top 6 European teams. It almost never happened, ever. And so the LAN finals for ESL Pro League, even though the tournament was as big as any tournament, like a major, it never would have the best teams just because it was online qualification. Whereas tournaments where you just invite the best LAN teams and they play it, they would be stacked. So the same response always happened to me. If I ever pointed out, like, well, this team probably wouldn't have made it if this was a LAN tournament, or vice versa, like this way really good team didn't make it, that's such a shame. I always got the same response. They were like, oh, wow, why are you hating on them? Because it's nearly always just a fan of the team that made it, Like, maybe they are that good and you're just not giving them a chance. It's like, the point you're missing, guys, is you really aren't looking at the distinction between the difference between what it's like to play an online game and an offline game. So I'll draw it back to this LEC example, right? If you believe that online and offline are essentially identical, like it's a negligible difference, then your real storyline out of this matchup goes like this. Holy shit, what happened to Perks with that incredible 1-2? When he's down 1-2, he always comes back. He's so clutch, greatest of all time from Europe. Nobody thinks that's ended because it was just an online game, wasn't it? Everyone knows it's different if you're in the studio. And like, think about this, Brokenshard. The way that Mad Lions won that series, where they basically almost won in game 4 and then threw it in a LAN setting where you have to go backstage from that and look at your team and then look at the other guys across the stage. There's a lot of pressure could exist there that just doesn't if you just sat at home, right? It's not that it makes it easier to win. It just makes it not as hard psychologically, in my opinion.
It's also
in the server, it's the same, obviously.
It's also exactly the same as saying like, oh, this team can play this champion, right? It's like they might play it well, they might play it badly. For Cloud9, it looked very similar. In the case of G2 Mad Lions, this did not look like a stage game from G2, period. Like, it did not look like any other G2 games that I've seen. So They were
And,
getting,
and as we alluded to before, that is not to take any props away from Mad Lions. Obviously, they did a great job.
and also it's a factor where when you have a team full of rookies, if you take them out of the high pressure stage situation and put them in a comfortable environment, they are most likely going to perform better. Not true of every rookie. Some of them are jazzed up by being on stage and have no fear. That's absolutely true. But I saw a Mad Lions team that looked extremely comfortable, and I saw a G2 team that looked like a train wreck.
For me, what was the huge difference is that, well, like Shadow, for example, had already had a really good split. He looked like
he's been
Superman.
great.
He had a good split. In that playoff game, the man looked like Superman. Like he actually was just legit destroying. And he played just like Selfmade and Yankos would play in scrims against each other, where everyone was 0-10 except for the junglers who were like 20-0. That's legit what I saw. I saw a scrim, like a highly mechanical player stomping every lane in scrims. That's what it looked like to me, really.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I've always made this point. One of the reasons I'm always biased to veterans and to people who can play the late game in League is, as much as it's brilliant when people win the best of ones in the split, I'm just waiting for the inevitable, like, the claps of the rookie and then the veteran player to just pull through. Whereas that doesn't look like that's a factor in LEC playoffs at the moment.
No, not really. I think there's a lot to talk about for this specific game, because there are so many things for us to like really consider.
It's
like
a really interesting series, actually.
G2 playing bad, it being online, some players like really popping off and doing well, and also talking about G2's decision to put caps on bot lane and perks on mid lane.
Yep.
And how
we'll get to all of it, buddy.
We'll get to that part later. Where do you want to start now? Where should we start now then? Because obviously that's going to come up.
So I want to talk about Shadow, because I've been watching this guy's season, and him and Razork have actually been impressing me quite a bit. These were the kind of junglers that I thought were interesting and up and coming. And I think Mad Lions was kind of given a gift, especially by G2, wanting to take all of these fights. Like Shakarez like mentioned on Twitter that I think it was game 3 is like the river fight in game 3 was the most like scrim thing I've ever seen. And here's the thing. You guys, most of you have never seen a professional scrim, so you just have to trust us that these games looked like scrims. If you have seen scrims, this is what scrims look like. A lot of people are taking risks that they would never in a bazillion years take if they were sitting on a stage, because the environment is different. You feel more pressure. Your play is going to be more conservative. And I pulled out those stats about combined kills per minute. So in general, scrims tend to have more blood as teams are more willing to take risks, or they're trying to experiment to see what their limits are, or to sort of test various scenarios and matchups. And the combined kills per minute was something like 1.13, I think I calculated, on average over this 5-game series. To put that in perspective, it was something like G2 was the bloodiest team in LEC, which is not a surprise, but they were like 0.96 for the entire regular season, and Mad Lions was 0.72. So Mad Lions in particular played really, really different to go from 0.72.
Twice as bloody, right?
Yeah, 0.72 combined kills per minute to 1.13 is an enormous leap, right? That's that's more than what, a 50% increase in kills per minute in one of their games compared to the season average.
It's like the thing is that G2, when they play scrims and when they go to LAN, it's actually not that much different if you really think about it. They'll play worse in online and better on LAN, but at the same time, G2 goes in really aggressively bloody, and they're like, we're just going to fight you, and other teams get like shell-shocked by that on LAN, because this is not what they're like preparing for. They're mentally preparing for slower macro-based games, and G2 kind of comes at it from a surprise.
The other thing that's...
All right, go on.
You know, the other thing about G2 is that the way they play and why it's so cool and why we like watching G2 is that what they do is they intentionally create really weird scenarios, because their strength is that they can play weird scenarios better than any other team in the whole world. Like, their ability to think on the fly about what to do in a specific situation. You can even see that in Game 5, which they almost won in this series. That is a crazy scenario that you have never seen before, ever, if you are a professional League of Legends player.
That's bonkers.
And the fact that they still were doing really cool shit, like trying to get like the Bard in position to sort of like use Magical Journey in the bot lane to like get to the Nexus, like that is what their superpower is being able to take any bizarre situation and then play the win conditions super well. So it's not surprising that they're the bloodiest team on average in the LEC, because they're the ones who capitalize. Like, the more chaos they inject into a game, or the more unexpected shit they do, they are confident that they're going to be able to react in a really beautiful way to that situation. So that is G2. That is their power. That is why we like watching them play. And before you guys get into this chaos style bullshit, chaos style was never a thing in LPL. Chaos style was an excuse for teams being bad at macro. G2 is not bad at macro. G2 just will catch you unawares and then play that macro scenario that neither of you have seen before better than anyone else can.
Here's what my analogy would be, Monty. Chaos style would be like saying that you could, it's not that I'm a bad boxer. I just like to brawl all the time. Though. It's
yes.
like, well, that's the whole point. Is that you're just saying I'm going to have no strategy. Essentially, I'm just going to make it like about just two people just go wildly flailing. Now that is a way to be a boxer, but you're not probably going to ever be a champion if you do that.
Yeah, and G2 just does unexpected things. They play the game in a way that is contrary to what you think it should be, and then from that scenario, they can beat you even harder, right? They are able to adapt faster.
Yeah, they basically create situations throughout the game that are just seemingly random, and they'll think faster. They're a smart team, not a smart team in the sense that they're really cerebral and that they're like super slow, strategic, methodical. They're just like always on, like in the zone, fully like aware of what they can do at any given moment in the game.
They're the jazz artists of League of Legends. They're out there playing and improvising according to a system, and it is if you are not trained in that level of improvisation, if you're just a classical pianist, you're going to get owned in that situation in terms of quality of improvisation.
And I think this was one of their main downfalls, because when they bring this style to this playoff match and you're playing against rookies who only really know mechanics and scrims, I'm 100% like, they're just like, all right, we're going to fucking go here. And then Mad Lions are like, all right, bet. And Shadow's just like mechanically beasting on everybody. I'm like, oh wait, this is literally how they play scrims. We are playing into them now. I think I made a tweet about Mad Lions in their game 1 draft against G2, how they drafted like FPX would. They would never pull that off on stage.
You mean this Nautilus mid pick?
The Nautilus mid, diving. Well, Karzi's Callista is really insane. He could play that on stage. I'm more like Humanoids. Nautilus is probably not going to be that good. I don't ever see them doing that on stage against G2. Sorry. I don't think so. I really don't.
It'd take a lot of balls, certainly, to lock that in.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not trying to discredit Mad Lions, because I think for a team of rookie... Do I think they're going to beat G2 in a rematch? No. Do I think that they have been incredibly impressive for a team of mostly rookie players? Absolutely. This has been a great debut for many of these players.
No, Mad Lions is a huge success story for Peter Dunn, who's like the head coach of that team, and for scouting in general, and for team building. It's like
this is one of the best GM jobs I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I would say if we're going to talk about Mad Lions is legit the new golden standard for what it's like to challenge a title in EU without being G2 or Fnatic.
Yes.
Like, every team should be copying or trying to emulate what Mad Lions have done in order to really get up there.
Because think about it for a second, right? G2 has the edge that Team Liquid does. They can buy the absolute best players, and the best players want to join because you got the other best players, right? That makes your job as a GM not easy, but easier. The other way you can do it is you can beat a TSM or a Fnatic. You've got the old brand name. You've got a couple of the old stars. Mad Lions, remember, this was Splice. The idea Splice shed most of the roster, some of it not even out of choice.
By the way, this was a team that made Worlds last year.
Yeah, think about this. Mad Lions, essentially, they didn't even get to choose that most of those players departed from the team. Loaded up with rookies, when, by the way, there were vets available. All rookies except Humanoid, who himself was a rookie last year, and are legitimately now like the second or third best team in Europe. at least at this point in time, once we know this result. Like, that's outrageous. What a great GM job.
So what Splice or Mad Lions had going for them was that they had Orome on bench, or not bench, on the roster.
Yeah, the National League team.
And they focused on him. And then they actually, I want to say that they chose it. I want to give them credit and say that they did a good job. But they also picked a great time to completely blow up a roster when they had a ready to LEC top laner on their team, which is hard to find in EU. There are very few really like good, capable top laners that could play, and Orome was really just one of them, of the newer.
Did they actually give him scrim time when there were splices? Is that what you said?
I think so. Yeah,
I
know.
Right.
That I tried to get Orome, no chance. I messaged Splice and I'm like, "Can we talk to Orome?" And they're like, "Absolutely not. He's ours. We have plans for him." So like they had plans for him and they developed him. They also picked a great time to blow up a roster and pick up rookies because this last EU Masters where Big One, Karzi's team won, there were lots of really good rookie talent on the market, like players in roles that are missing, like support. The support pool suddenly had some players that you could look at. Denik, Misfits, Kaiser, now is on Mad Lions, Karzi, big, Shadow, Mouse Sports, Zaze,
Steel back. There's a lot of good things.
Literally, they picked the best time to just be like, we want rookies. And then they just picked the players that they wanted. I think if they had Denik, their team would be really good. Like there were just good players available. It was a abnormally in EU to have these good players in these roles. Usually you'll find good mid talent. They already had a.
This is like the best draft class to use in American sports analogy.
Absolutely. Yeah, and they really drafted such good choices, good players everywhere, and they had Orome. So they were like, we are set. We are going in with this. Even if they didn't make playoffs, I still think, or didn't beat G2, I still think it's like a great season for them and a great split for them. They have so much to build.
I also think it's very interesting. Shakra has pointed out to me that Shadow declared as a Chinese player, which means that in a way, like what could happen is he goes to the LPL next season, right?
It says on his Gamepedia page that he apparently was offered a spot by EDG in 2019, but he didn't accept it. I mean, that in itself is very unusual, right? What's going on there?
I mean, he declared his region as China, so he actually counts as an import player for Europe right now, which is never a big deal. Usually,
it's not going to matter in Europe, is it? That's the thing. Yeah,
it's not going to matter. But I do think I do think that that's like a baller move because
it implies he's going to go to LPL in like a year or two, doesn't it? Yeah.
Which is, I don't know. I think that's sick. That
would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see that happen. But for now, I've just been incredibly impressed with him as a player. It's been a long time, I think, since I've seen like him and Razork. I really like, and seeing two junglers in a region improve so fast, because jungle is a very difficult position to play at the professional level because it requires so much coordination, like with the rest of your team. It's all about how well you're communicating with your lanes and how well you understand the lane matchups, or how well that's being relayed to you by your laners, because it dictates the entire flow of the game. So it's a particularly hard position to make a jump to from solo queue into the professional scene. And I think both these guys have done it really well.
They were also really different players, Razork and Shadow, for the teams that they played on. For Giants, Razork was more of a set-up player for Milica, who was Vitality's mid laner, who unfortunately never actually got to play a game.
We never got to see him, unfortunately.
I would have loved to talk about him if he got to play, but unfortunately, maybe next split we can talk about him. And he was more of a setup because of the way that they drafted for Giants was their top laner would most likely play like tanks, and he would play aggressive AP champions like Gragas, which is his best champion, what he's playing. And he's more of a traditional jungler, like I would say, with good mechanics. Then you have Shadow, and Shadow played for Mouse. And I competed against Shadow in the Prime League or Premier Tour very often. And what Shadow was basically for Mouse Sports was the mechanical standpoint of the team. He was the carry, because their bot lane, which was Kaiser at the time, Gistic, and a guy called Konjo, now Aza, they played mage bot lanes, Swain Tarek, Brand Pike, and then they played GP Aatrox top laner. So it kind of left Shadow and their mid laner Knight to kind of pick up on the mechanical standpoint. So Shadow developed...
Basically, you had a band-aid team, right? Was like the logic.
Yeah,
like they had to play those things in the bot lane was the implication, right?
Well, yeah, because Aza/Konjo only could really play traditional AD carries like Xayah and Ezreal, and otherwise he'd revert to playing stuff like Brand, Swain Tarek, etc. And it worked for them, and it was really good for them. And this kind of let Shadow develop or make a playstyle in which he was playing Olaf Lee Sin really often and kind of just like blasting people with it, which is also why they had such high Lee Sin priority in the LEC and why Shadow looked so good on this champion in the LEC. And I think that when they brought Shadow onto Mad Lions, with Orome being literally the king of weak side and a support that he's really comfortable to play around, he was basically enabled to play this with a much better AD carry, like a miles better AD carry in Carzzy, who can play carries and he actually can play mages too.
Yeah, and we saw that. I do think we should talk about the Caps versus Perks thing, because I think even if they end up winning this split, I'm ready to throw in the towel on this one.
Just for international purposes, they have to change this, surely.
Please.
Yeah, please
Like,
stop.
so
I don't want to see it anymore.
I'm beginning to think this is just like Perks's big brain play to prove that he is in fact the best Western player to ever exist in League of Legends history, because he was successful at swapping to the mid lane or swapping to AD carry, whereas Caps has not been. And I guess what was so infuriating about this series and why this was kind of, for me, the nail in the coffin was that it's not just that Caps has been not great on most of the champions that aren't Aphelios, where he can just literally face roll his keyboard and win games. But even when we saw him back on mages, like especially that last game on
Fuck
Ziggs,
that Ziggs game. That Ziggs
but
was one of the most handsome moments I've seen in many years.
Here's the thing. Like, people will flame him because whatever, he messed up at the end and didn't kill the Nexus. But that's not the reason why you should flame him. The reason you should flame him is everything else that happened in that game. Like a heat of the moment mistake like that, people will make those. But
even so, though, that shows he's not that comfortable.
Yeah. To me, what this looked like was that even though this is a champion that he should be able to play as a mid laner, it was almost like he doesn't understand the power spikes when it's different when you're under-leveled comparatively in the bottom lane. Like, it looked like he didn't know the limits of Ziggs in a bot lane. He was playing it like it was a mid lane Ziggs where he would be further ahead in terms of levels. And not only that, but his teleports like actually hurt my soul at times. So I'm just done. I'm done here. Like, I think Caps is a great player and did really well in the mid lane last year. And I think Perks, buddy, you've proved it. You're the best Western player ever in League of Legends history. I think we could just agree on that. Anybody think otherwise? Silence. Great. In terms of not only being able to play multiple positions, have the flexibility, have the in-game leadership, have the right attitude to bolster.
Got every
his
metric
team.
ticked, doesn't it? Let's be real.
It's fucking unfair. Perks is a fucking unfair player to have because he is incredibly marketable. He is super good as a teammate. He is an emotional leader of the team. He's
the secret GM.
Anything. He's the secret GM. Like, why does this guy exist? He shouldn't exist in a pro esport. It is incredible. But I think like we're done. I'm done with this. I can't deal with it. Like, Caps, we've seen what Caps can do. We've seen the limit of Caps's play. I need him to move back to the mid lane.
By the way, I would just like to issue an absolutely earnest and honest apology to Perks, because one of the reasons I initially doubted you as an AD carry is I thought, come on, mate, you've still got like the best player in the fucking mid top. You've got the jungler I think has been the best ever from Europe. You've got a monster in your lane in Mickey X. Couldn't anyone do that? Turns out they couldn't. So, well done. You did an amazing job.
I think there's quite a bit to discuss about this, but Monty's just pretty much right. Caps is a really good mid laner. I don't think anyone is ever
absurdly good.
Absurdly good mid laner. Perks is an absurdly good mid laner. Perks is just an absurdly good player. Caps is not a very good bot laner. I think that they thought it would just be as easy as just Caps will play like these types of champions, but it's not about playing ADs and mages. Playing AD carry, marksman / bot laner requires a much different mindset, and this is a mindset that Caps doesn't really have. When he plays mid and he likes to play for like the 1v2 outplays and aggression, he can do that because he's such a central figure and then people will rotate into him. You don't really rotate for an AD carry or bot laner. Like, that's not generally what happens. He's now becoming the rotator. Like, he's like the person that's moving in. And I don't think Caps is that good at that, and also not that good as like what Monty said, dealing with the EXP disadvantages that come from playing in bot lane and the type of champions it required to play.
Or even playing the champions we know he can play with an EXP disadvantage. That's what did it for me, man. That's what did it, where I was like, okay, you can't even play the champions you should be able to play in the bot lane well, because you can't even grasp this scenario and how it's changed. And at that point, that's where it was over for me.
Yeah, I also think that well, I actually completely lost my train of thought. I also think that like the one main thing with Caps as well is the type of mindset that you have to be in to play bot lane sometimes, in which you're sometimes played away from. Whereas as a mid laner, there's almost never a situation in which you're being played away from if you're such an absurdly good mid laner. Mid is the central point of the map. In order to get access to side lanes of the jungle, you go through mid. And Caps is most used to having that happen. Perks dealt with that so much better in bot lane. He knew many times when it was correct for him to stay back and knew how to do much more with much less. Caps is not that kind of player. Caps is not the kind of player that you're saying, I need you to do this with much less than what you're used to. Especially because you also have Wonder in the top lane, who's a player that can absorb resources and do well with it. And you can see that they tried it, but more often than not, Wonder was actually weak siding.
Yes. That's the most frustrating thing to me about this entire G2 thing. It's not even the whole Caps Perks thing. It's the fact that I've had to watch Wonder play like a third of the fucking split like he was a support / a bitch top laner. Meanwhile, the guy literally, if he was on a different team, might have been the MVP of the whole league. Like, he's absurdly good. So if you're band-aiding Caps, why even bother? Why you've got such a sick team, just make it amazing again.
I mean, and this isn't a knock on Caps, by the way. I think Caps is a world-class mid laner. We know that. The problem is that he's not a freak like Perks. And, we discussed this, that there really isn't. And at the end of the day, was this an interesting experiment to run? Sure. Yeah, it was. Like, I understand their reasoning for running it, especially because, as we've discussed, Spring Split doesn't do anything for Worlds. So why not? Like, why not try? They discussed last year that one of their problems was sort of like trying too hard for MSI and then running out of gas by the time they got to Worlds. So I don't even think G2 is going to be particularly upset about what's going on right now, because they'll
especially because they can reverse it anyway. Yeah. That's the stupidest part.
So I actually like the fact that they even tried this experiment just to see if it was possible, but I think we kind of know what the answer to that question is.
I have a slightly different take on that, though, because I tell you now, go back and look at any of the videos, any of the shows where I talked about this move when it first began. I was always very skeptical of this move, especially when I heard this detail. It's when I had the players on my shows and I asked them, like, does this mean it's like a full-time swap, though? Like, is he only going to be AD and you're mid? When I found out that was the case, that's when I actually didn't like the move. Because I actually liked the move when I thought what was going to happen was that they would put Caps AD, and then every now and then, if it was the right time, they would do a crazy swap in the draft, so you could never know who was mid, basically. And I thought, holy shit, this could actually open up all sorts of like strategy elements, and like it would make it so hard to draft against you because you think, oh, is that champion going to Perks mid? We can play against that with this match. Fuck, that's Caps on it suddenly. Except that they never did that because apparently, based on what they've said, they think it's like not worth doing that. It'd be too complicated, blah blah blah. But it sounded cool. It sounded like an amazing concept. So
that's
I found
literally what everybody thought. Like,
that was the behind the scenes rumor, right? Wasn't that like the rumor everyone thought?
I thought that they were just opening a new avenue to draft, and it's like, oh fuck.
Yeah, that made it seem like they'd be unbeatable, didn't it?
Yeah, if you were dealing with Nico, Yasuo, Tristana triple flex before, like, what the fuck are you gonna do now? Like, people are legit moving lanes. I don't know. I think it just made G2 predictable, and it ruined their like winning formula. And it's like when G2 becomes predictable, that was like one of their biggest strengths, like Monty was saying, is that they were not easy to predict because they themselves didn't have a clear-cut plan going into the game. They would make decisions on the fly better than anyone else. So it's kind of going back to like age-old thing where he says like, how can your enemy know what you're doing if you don't fucking know what you're doing yourself? Right?
By the way, you can see that in this series as well, because they still think in the mindset that they're the old G2. Like, go and look at, like, I think it was game 1. Dude, they're the ones making all the fights happen. They're doing all the engaging. They're the ones going into the fog of war because the old G2 would make a fucking amazing fight there and just they'd blow the game wide open. In this scenario, Mad Lions was turning half the fights on them, or they'd catch them out and revert. Like, they'd try and run away from the fight and just reverse it. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, you could tell G2 was really shocked by the way this series went. Like, they weren't ready for this.
I think that like it's just it's a failed experiment, and I want to see them swap back, but at the same time, it's like I think that Perks will probably handle the swap well, but will Caps handle the swap? Like, will he be able to get back and perform quickly? Yeah, okay.
I think it'll be okay. I mean, And the hilarious thing about this is like we're talking about it as a failed experiment, and yet they're still one of the best teams.
They might still
world.
win LEC. Let's be real. Like they almost won this series.
Yeah,
but
they
the problem
still
is,
win.
that's why you have to set expectations relatively though, because the problem is the expectation for this team should be win worlds, not LEC. Like when LEC was already, that was like a 4-4. Everyone assumed they were going to win LEC. Like, yeah, you're supposed to try and win worlds now. Whereas this lineup right now, listen, I'm going to say it, and I don't care if even if they get to them. Let's say I'm so confident they won't make a transformation and Caps become amazing and win worlds, and then this will be the beginning of their video, like Golden Guardian style. Like, haha, Thorin said they wouldn't do it. Like, no, there's no way this team could win worlds as it is right now. I guarantee it. I'm not going to put my life on it. Fuck that. Some things aren't worth putting your life on, Monty. I just realised in that moment as I was saying it. I'll just put my word on it. There you go.
I mean, I do think that there's, given the pandemic, like, and the kind of practice scenario that these teams have, like, it's not inconceivable that they could do it because of.
I guess we can't know exactly. Yeah,
but in a normal year, the answer would be no. In this year,
I would bet my life on.
Yeah, in this year, it's a little because of the difference in practice and like competition that teams have had, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. Definitely, the chaos could cause it to happen, but I think in any normal circumstance, it would not. Do you guys want to talk any more about the other series? We can talk about Fnatic because Fnatic is looking pretty good right now. It was a weird series.
Actually, one thing I want to ask was this, right? So coming into this, I've been hearing all split long that the storyline of LEC goes like this. Yeah, sure, Mad Lions and Misfits and Rogue, like they have potential and they have rookies and, maybe they can make that. But there's an elite class. There's this elite class. It's G2, it's Fnatic, it's OG. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, take OG out of that class. Because why do they get to be in that class if they can't beat G2 and Fnatic? They should be down with Misfits and fucking Rogue and Mad Lions. So the problem with OG for me is I actually think they're the new Splice for me. They're the most fucking boring team to watch.
Really
and the reason why is because they can't beat the teams above them and they will beat the teams below them and half the time in boring fashion. Like that's the recipe for a team I don't want to watch play League of Legends. Sorry.
No, I mean, you are right that they've kind of become the new Splice. I also do think that they don't necessarily belong in that upper class because I think that when it comes to, we talked about predictability and
they're the most predictable team, surely.
Yeah, OG are predictable. Fnatic are just like, fucking hell, what do these guys do? And they do it really well. And G2 are the same thing, but OG don't have much depth, but they do things well. Like they play the game well.
They know how they want to play the game. Certainly, they play to their own senses. I don't like them.
Brokenshard, get close to your mic. Get close to your mic.
Sorry. We can say that they're boring, but they're successful with this style, and they did well with it. Just Fnatic is like, what? You're not going to do that against Fnatic. You're not going to beat Fnatic this way.
The worst matchup for that style.
You will consistently beat worse teams, but you will never challenge. That's the big issue I had with Origen.
I mean, we should discuss this series because I found the way that these drafts like sort of shook out to be quite strange, especially because we had 4 games of Senna play from Reckless. And look, I like the way Fnatic played this. Honestly, I do. I thought it was super funny. For me, game 3 was kind of like, was it game 3? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think it was game 3.
Was the Trundle split push?
The Trundle split push was great. I loved seeing that. Even though that was the game Fnatic
that was game
lost.
2.
No, it was game 3.
Wait a minute. What am I talking about?
Yeah, Trundle split push was game 3. They lost that.
They lost it. So even though Fnatic lost that game, why for me this was the most important, impressive game of the series was that Fnatic actually clawed their way back into that game and showed like their ability to play good League of Legends from behind and improvise. And I thought that it was really entertaining to see Hylissang like adapt in that way and play a split push support.
You definitely would never expect to see that in a playoff game from Hylissang.
Yeah,
No.
it was.
I mean, the whole thing was weird.
But that's Hylissang, though, isn't it? Like that's like classic Hylissang, where he will find a new way to play something. He did that with like Ghost, Flash, Support, Annie back when he was on UOL, and I feel like that is like the perfect way to utilize a player like Hylissang.
By the way, since this is a show where we're allowed to flame people, I'm gonna make this a totally not loaded question. I mean, it's already loaded. That's a joke, isn't it? Like I've just said that. But Brokenshard, If we're going to talk about teams, we have to look at the players on the teams. What do you think of Destiny on OG? What's your take on him?
Actually decent. I think he's pretty good. I don't think he's that bad. I think that it seemed a bit questionable to import from Australia to EU, but support talent in EU was basically Denik and Kaiser, and they both got snatched up really early in the offseason.
You'd rather have Destiny than Steelback. See?
I think that's a tough question. That's a tough question to answer because I don't think Steelback is bad. I also don't think Steelback is like that crazy good though.
He's not a monster, certainly, but he's good.
I think that them taking a risk on Destiny wasn't necessarily bad. It's also up to Upset, like what Upset wants, because Upset's the kind of player where like I feel like he's the kind of player where if he doesn't like the support he's playing with, he won't.
Yeah, that's true.
Like,
I'm with you on that.
Let Upset decide. If Upset really wants Destiny, then yeah, coaching staff is like, we'll get Destiny for you. Not sure how that could have been good, but I don't think that Destiny. I don't think Destiny being on Origen was the problem for Origen.
Yeah, I agree. He's unremarkable, but it wasn't the reason why they were like losing these games. Can we talk about the drafting here for Fnatic? Because like I found
what part of it?
I find it very interesting that Reckless played one game of Senna the entire spring split, and then plays 4 games of Senna here, and they're prioritizing that build with the support player taking all of the farm and trying to power up Hylissang on the Zilean, which I think is cool and effective.
Makes sense for their team.
Yeah. I mean, I like the fact that in game 1, they drafted, classic like Yasuo Gragas, but they also throw the top lane Zac in there. And then they've got such great engage, and they can just instantly revive one of their engagers with the Zilean ultimate if they go in. Like, I'm quite a fan of, I think, what Fnatic was trying to do in the draft here.
Yeah, I think it's very smart. It's like, you have to consider the type of team that they have and who are their main initiators or main setup players. Broxa was never that player when they had him on the team. Like, if you think about it, the only player that they really changed was Selfmade. So what he was for SK Gaming was Selfmade was like a lot for SK. He was an initiator. He was a main focal point. He was the early game. He did a lot for SK. Now you bring him onto Fnatic and he's going to do a lot, whereas Broxa wasn't necessarily that for Fnatic. He did much less in that regard. So now you have, voice crack, 3 players who are very strong initiators: Hylissang, Bwipo, and Selfmade. These are all players that can find opportunities to go in. Reckless is just Reckless. You kind of know what you get from him. He's like a chill, will sit back and scale and play lane well. Power up Hylissang to power up Bwipo and Selfmade is a fucking great strategy.
I really liked it. I like that they stuck with it too. It's weird because I keep going back to this game 3, which is the one that Fnatic lost, even though like I actually think this showed better than some of their wins how good they are. It also, even though Origen won, was one of the more, I think, damning drafts, because Origen tried to ban out the Zilean and the Tahm Kench, which are the typical, Zilean isn't, but Tahm Kench is the typical laner that you see with Senna, getting the CS and becoming super tanky. Now, the Zilean was something that we saw here, which was effective, and I love the pivot to Trundle at the end of the draft from Fnatic as sort of a substitute when these were banned. Now, obviously, the question is, why don't you just ban Senna? But I do think that you
did tweet this, by the way.
Okay, did you?
I did tweet that. Please ban Senna.
Why would you ban Zilean and Tahm Kench and just not ban the Senna? Because you're actually just... they found a way around that, which I thought was clever. But it also showed how well Fnatic, how the depth at which they had considered this strategy.
Yeah, the thing is, like, when you play this Senna, it almost kind of forces you to just dive bot. Because if you let this Senna get away with scaling and farming up the other champion, you're going to have to deal with now 2 champions with lots of... And when Upset and Destiny are like technically your best players, do you really want them in neutral scaling matchups? I think that the Aphelios Thresh was a good pivot and it did well. But if they just banned Senna, Reckless would just go to Ezreal, and then they'd have to deal with like Ezra Khan as Pyke. And maybe they just never wanted to deal with that. Because that's also scary. Because that's like the bread and butter of Fnatic, which is like Ezreal with roaming support, Yeah. And theoretically kind of would be the same thing. The main thing for me that I want to point at is a lot of people give Origen a lot of flack for not doing much with their leads. When you compare to what Fnatic do with their leads, it's night and day. And then look at game 3 where Origen had the lead and then Fnatic still almost win the game. That's like much more concerning, I would say, than just the drafting. However, like,
And by the way, there was a 29-6 kill difference in game 3. Fnatic only had 6 kills, and at every single point in that game, it looked like Fnatic would win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a huge problem, but that even banning Senna wouldn't really fix. All banning Senna would do is make this power up Hylissang to power up self-made Whippo a lot more difficult and less feasible, but it would still put Fnatic in a situation where you've still got Nemesis kind of scaling up. He played in all 3 games. Nemesis played, like, I would say, champions that scale relatively well: Azir, Cassio, Diana, Yasuo.
I mean, that's Nemesis champion pool, isn't it?
Yasuo kind of being the off.
I still hate Diana, by the way, even though I know people play it for the Rumble matchup. I still think it's bad.
The Diana blind was a bit strange for me personally, but I don't think it was like that bad of a pick. I think it was fine if that's the matchup and the flex that they're looking for, because they're dealing with Rumble flex. So it's like we're blinding Diana to deal with Rumble, but also go into something else, right? The Rumble could have gone top.
Well, here's the thing, Brokenshard. Isn't this basically, on the OG side, playing into what we were talking about before, where when you characterize them as a team that will beat all the teams below them, but won't beat Fnatic and G2? One of the reasons why, I think the person who said it best was, I think it was Whippo, maybe, in that hype video they made for the Fnatic OG game earlier in the split, where they were doing the Alfari versus Whippo one. And I think it was Whippo said the line, or someone from Fnatic did, that like OG doesn't play the other team. They just try to play the map and just like almost win by default. Well, that's the problem, is that's going to work amazingly against a bunch of like bad teams, rookie teams, inexperienced. But the problem is the best teams, what makes them the best is the ability to close the game out. Like when they get an edge, they don't give it up. They're just going to close the game. They know how to win a game. Whereas Origen just almost waits for you. It's like they try to just do a rope-a-dope and tire you out or something. You just collapse at the end of the game. But so if you stick in there, they can still have problems in a game where, like you're saying, Monty, that scoreline in terms of kills, that reminds me of that thing we were pointing out when we watched the game cribs, where TSM would be like playing games where they had like 28 kills and the other team had 7, and it was like a close ending. And you're like, who the fuck's... Why are they using the advantage? What is this game? Because obviously it was like 8 years ago, wasn't it?
Origen know how to build leads, but they don't have that killer instinct in which to like actually close the game. And I think that it's like this edge that's missing from them, some kind of personality or mentality from their games, because they're good enough to build their leads, they're good enough to play the map, but they're missing something. Like Fnatic and G2 have it, and you can see that they have it. They just have like this killer instinct or this like trigger pulling mentality that they can just take everything. That Origen are missing, and I'm not sure where it is.
My theory craft is this, because one of the angles I've been working on a lot, I should really just get on and do videos on these. I stopped bringing the same point up every time. But basically, one of the things I think in the future people have to consider when putting teams together is also like the style balance. Like this team has too many players who have the same vision of the game, but in a negative way. It means you don't have someone, as you're saying, who like make a crazy play, who has the killer, or who will even just be like, I'm just going to carry the end of this game. Like they're all sort of like, we're all playing correctly, like boss. They all just play to the same script every time, you know. Whereas that's actually the best analogy would be this. It's like you made the point earlier about the Fnatic team. The change in Fnatic in getting self-made is they went from having like 3 more passive, less decisive players to only having 2, but in roles where it's totally fine and it makes sense for the way the game's structured. Like now they look amazing. It was only a tweak that it took. So I feel like it might even be the same for OG. Like if they maybe had like obviously this will sound like sacrilege, but if their mid laner, I'm just going off what we've seen recently, was like Jizuke, that might be all it'd take. Maybe that's the edge they need.
I think it's difficult because Nukeduck always kind of looks good.
That's his secret, mate. This is what I hate about Nukeduck. This guy's the guy who knows how to look really good coming second. He just makes it so, like, he loses the game just slightly and you go, damn it, unlucky Nukeduck again. He's so close. Tell you what, he's still elite. He's not the best, but he's still elite. It's like, how many times are you... Like, is this a PR exercise? You're not the fucking Washington Generals, mate. Like, you're supposed to win some of these games if you're the best.
I would say, instead of replacing Nukeduck, imagine if, like, OG had Hylissang. Like, how fucking crazy that...
I thought you were liking Destiny. What are you talking about? It's weird. You
I like Destiny, but imagine if they had that crazy...
You need someone with the crazy gene in that spot. I'm with you.
I think they just need somebody with a style to play around. I think the advantage of having Nukeduck is that he has such insane versatility and consistency that it's great to have him, but you need to have somebody else with more of a distinct playstyle identity on the roster, because if you don't have that, it's so predictable. And there's no upside. Like, it's just like, you know what the ceiling is, you know what the floor is. They're always just going to be right there in the middle, and that's
by the way, the worst place to be in all of sports or esports. The worst place to be is good enough that you look like you're about to contend, but you never do. And then as a result, it makes you too good to change all the players every time. So you keep with the same approach. Like if you instead went for broke and you were like misfits, yeah, you blow the whole team up when it doesn't work. So like one of the problems I have in this team is similar. It's like the only player I actually think is legitimately a contender for best at his position is Alfari. And they certainly don't play it as though he was the main player that we were trying to carry the game through.
But you can't really from top lane right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's going to be hard, certainly.
It's also really difficult into Bwipo if he's just going to pull off this fucking Zac top lane. Like, actually playing carries into Bwipo is so hard. This guy is just, like, difficult to draft into in this way. Like, the best picks to play into Bwipo are GP. Stuff like GP, you know, like GP.
Sure.
I mean, purely for my own entertainment, if I was a professional player, Bwipo would be one of the last players I would want to play against because he's just so annoying in lane. It just looks like he just kills the fun of his opponent, and he delights in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, Bwipo, like... It's difficult to describe Bwipo because I feel like in a lot of ways he's like the Caps of top lane, where he will just limit test every matchup to the maximum. But he does it in such a smart way where it's like, you know he's playing dumb, but he's actually not dumb. It's like kind of like Omega Brain level type.
I know, he looks so frustrating to play against.
Right, we did an episode of the Crackdown with him, and I think a lot of people were actually very impressed because he spoke, like his way of describing the game and the matchups was very, very good. I believe he even said something along the lines of like, if in a matchup early on, he sees that, for example, you'll just like let him take a certain trade that you probably should contest that. If he just sees you do that a few times, it's like he's good. The reason he'll look brain dead to other people who don't know this is then he'll just be like, right, well, unless you make me respect this, I'm just going to play up all the time then. If you're going to give me that, then I'm going to make you adapt to it. Whereas other people don't always do that. Like, there's plenty of top laners in the modern game aren't like that at all. Nearly all of them, to be fair.
And also like he has a really good vision on how to abuse those openings in top lane matchups. Like, why he's so dangerous to give GP to, for example, is because he knows the limits of that champion in and out, where even in bad matchups, like, for example, thinking back to a scrim almost a year and a half ago, early on in the split, he played GP into Ryze top lane. GP loses to Ryze at a certain point when Ryze gets items, but he has a few openings. He legit stood in the tri-bush from blue side, you know, like on the red tri-bush, and just walked behind Ryze to fight him level 1 and pressure him level 1. This is something that you like don't see. It's ridiculous. He's losing all his health for the trade, but it gets him an advantage, you know? And like that's the kind of thing that Whippo will look for any way to get an advantage. If he can do it, he will do it, which I think is a really important thing, you know, where he kind of looks brain dead, but it's actually like, wow, this is difficult to play against. I don't want to say it's good, because it will cost him against maybe better teams, more disciplined teams.
It also depends who your teammates are, if you can pull it off, etc. Yeah, of course. There's a lot of factors.
But it's definitely annoying. It's definitely annoying. More than anything. And Alfari is too much more like of a by-the-books player, and that's why I don't think, like, if OG had a better bot lane, they could have maybe done a bit more in this series, or a more aggressive jungler / mid laner, but they were never getting this advantage through top lane with Alfari and Tibwipo, because it just the type of players don't allow this type of advantage to be gotten.
Is Fnatic the best team in LEC?
I mean, the problem is people are going to think
no. If I say no, I have to leave Twitter for a week. But I think if we're judging based on like the way that they played and their understanding of an identity, I would say that yeah, right now they are. I still think if I would take G2 over them in like a full best of 5, but considering the context of how G2 played against Mad and how Fnatic played against OG, I think that they have more tricks up their sleeve to deal with G2. And they're probably a bit better.
The reason why I think they are right now is not just because of G2's loss, which I think is an anomaly and I think they're going to bounce back from, but it's because Fnatic showed us an entirely different style based around this Senna when we saw an entire season of Reckless on like Misfortune and Aphelios in terms of the regular split. And the fact that they were able to adapt their style and play so smart around Hylissang in this series, I think shows a really good depth to their play.
Just to add to that as well, weren't Fnatic also known as the team that played the same champions every game?
Yes.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
That was the old
them
MO,
with them
yeah,
less?
of course.
Yeah.
They've completely erased that
That's
narrative.
that's
with what they did
that's
today.
why they changed my mind on
Do you want to know what's hilarious about that, by the way, Brokenshard? Just to
Yeah, go
crow, I'll just point it out. When all the people used to get triggered when me and Veteran did our Elitist United show, and Veteran would always say that basically Fnatic had limitations based on, and it wasn't that they only played certain champions, it's that they had to only play those champions because the only way they could make the game work. Now, every Fnatic member, with the exception of maybe Bwipo, like was maybe political and sort of answered like he agreed. Everyone else, like Youngbuck was like, there is no system, it's nonsense, we just pick certain champions that are good. All the players were arguing like, this is nonsense, it's not true at all. They make one change, but it's to an aggressive jungler, and all of a sudden there's none of those problems. All of a sudden, it's because, without hating on the guy, Broxah just wasn't as good as you stupid Fnatic fans think he was. He literally was, essentially, even though he's the jungler, he was set up to look good in that way. The rest of the team worked to set him up. What fucking jungler in the world has? It's the other way around normally. The jungler's supposed to set the others up. So when you put in a better jungler, all their problems went away overnight.
If Broxah had Doinby, he would probably look a lot better. Like, for example, like Broxah is the type of player. Broxah is the type of player that you would want a mid laner like Doinby to play for, because he when Broxah gets set up, which he did a lot, and when he looked really good on stuff like Lee Sin, it's because teams set him up. And when you give him that setup, he takes it super well. Broxah has Jensen. He had Nemesis. Nemesis is not that kind of player to do that. He's not. He tried to be, but he's not. Jensen is definitely not that kind of player. Don't get me wrong. I don't even know what kind of player Jensen is. I don't even think he's that good anymore. But that's for a different day entirely. But that's why I think Broxah was worse for Fnatic, and it looked worse because instead of using the mid laner to set him up, they had to use Bwipo and Hylissang to do it. You know? And so that prevented Bwipo from being able to play focal for his lane.
Yes.
It prevented Nemesis to be able to play focal for his lane, and it prevented their bot lane to play focal for the lane because they needed to set up their jungler in the early game. And now they have Selfmade. Not only does Selfmade and Nemesis have that existing synergy, but Selfmade can play anything, and he can play it really well. Like, his Gragas and Sejuani are beyond. Like, I think what Selfmade was most famous for was landing that super insane Sejuani ult on Reckless in the second game of the LEC last year. And then he can also play like Olaf and Lee Sin and Gragas and Evelynn and whatever super well.
I've turned the corner on Selfmade. At the start of this year, I wasn't like, I didn't think it was going to make that much of a difference within Fnatic, but now after seeing an entire split, I think I was incorrect, and that Selfmade is actually quite good.
This guy's a monster.
No, he's very good. Like, yeah, he left SK, and I'm still part of SK, and we don't get along very well, but he is a really good player.
And then the other angle as to why Fnatic is the best team, I thought they were the best team coming into the playoffs, is not only do they look even better, like everyone's activated now, but then you got to throw in on the G2 side. How can I fall back on all that stuff of like G2's clutch though, and they find a way to win for that? This isn't G2. This is a different G2 lineup. Like, it's clearly not the team they had last year. I mean, last year they had strengths everywhere. That's all another reason they were so difficult to beat, is because like you can't just go, right, well, I got this one lane behind, so we're probably going to win the game. Like, that never worked against the old G2. It does on this one. You get certain lanes behind, they're going to be in big trouble as the game goes on. So in the playoffs, I still think they've got the wherewithal. They can probably climb back and maybe even go to the final. They could probably do that. But I actually don't. I think Fnatic's going to win this split. I think it's pretty clear to me.
I'm tempted to agree unless there's a big turnaround from G2.
I just have a hard time betting against G2. I really do. But I think that Fnatic are in a state of like flow where they look really difficult to not only read but like deal with.
Okay, so we're gonna. I really don't want to talk about that Rogue.
I've got to go soon, by
Misfits
the way, so
theory.
let's make it like 10 more minutes.
I don't really want to talk about the Rogue Misfits series because it was so boring. It was.
It wasn't worth talking about.
It was easily the most boring playoff series out of all of them between LEC and LCS, and like, I hope we actually get like. I do want to see Rogue against other people, but I don't think really either of them have a shot. Let's talk about...
Spoiler for everyone. Turns out 1.5 players aren't enough to win playoff series.
Basically,
Whatever.
to sum up the Rogue series is Han Sama good, V-Boy bad next. B-Boy or whatever his name.
B-Boy, yeah.
Yeah, B-Boy, sorry. That's it.
Oh, OG versus Rogue is the next series. Oh.
Yeah, let's do that quickly then.
No. Oh God, that's like so boring. Let's talk about this. Who is the best team in either LEC or LCS playoffs? Is it C9, G2, Fnatic? If we were,
Oh, you mean like
who? If we went to MSI today, and it was LCS
Who's
rep
the best Western
versus
team, basically?
LEC rep, who is the best team?
Then the only discussion we would be having is can C9 beat Fnatic?
Yes, basically.
And if C9 is better than G2.
So which side do you come down on that then?
I think Fnatic is better than G2, which is better than C9.
So you think C9 is worse than both G2 and Fnatic?
You know what? Listen, I'm going to sound like a hater here, but that is my designated role on the show. This is the problem. I've watched on nearly every C9 game this split. They never faced anything like when G2 plays from behind and do those miracle cuts. They never faced any team that could do something like that. Most of the games when C9 had those big leads, the game was over. They just had to, as you heard from Licorice earlier, they just had to basically keep their wherewithal and play the correct way. And if they did that, they would just win all the games, why they nearly did have a perfect split. And were absolutely an amazing team. Now, here's the thing. I'm not a hater. So I even said this weeks ago. If they were in LEC, I'm not one of those people who goes, whoever is the best in NA would be like 6th in EU. No, Cloud9 would be like a contender for the title in LEC. The difference is, though, like, I'm sorry, I just haven't seen them tested in the way I've seen G2.
I think the other disappointing thing is that if Cloud9 was an LEC, if they were getting better practice and more,
they might be better as well. Yeah, that's a good count.
They might actually be better than either of those teams, but it is hard to believe that they would be able to beat them simply because, like you say, they haven't been tested in the same way. And we know that they're a very good team, but they just haven't had access to the level of competition that I think could push them over the top.
Also, let's just see Blabber do that against Jankos and against Selfmade.
I want to see Blabber do that against Selfmade, by the way.
He might be able to. I'm just saying, let's see it, because those guys are very, very legit.
They also don't have the same limitations that the junglers in NA do.
Exactly. Who was he playing against in NA?
You're not talking about just the best junglers. You're talking about an MSI winner and a world's finalist jungler, and Selfmade, who is challenging a world's finalist and MSI championship jungler, and Blabber, who's like dealing with Meteos who can't play Lee.
We had a pretty bad jungle pool this split.
It was dire because even the other junglers like Svenskeren were dealing with synergizing with new teammates and like having a very different mid laner in Svenskeren's case. Like the difference between Jizuke and Niski is enormous in terms of play style. So, I mean, I think it is really hard to judge that. Here's a different question, since I think we all agree on that, at least in principle, because it would be hard to rate C9 as the best team because there's just no evidence that they could be for the reason.
I still think it's. Here's the thing, though. I do think people should acknowledge, though, that it is actually a distinction that we're even saying that they've got a chance, though. They would have a chance against these teams, certainly.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting about this conversation is like G2 is maybe the best team in the world, or Fnatic might be the best team in the world. Like that's literally a consideration that we have to have, especially with the hiatuses from the LCK and LPL. If we were to play MSI today, Fnatic might very well go in as a favorite if they win LEC.
For anyone who hasn't been following the other regions, LCK is still a fucking mess.
Terrible.
And in LPL, the fucking stupid idiots in FPX, by bringing in Khan, I think have actually ruined their team. So there aren't these there aren't these Asian titans that we think of in past years. Like, it's not a joke. If Fnac's the best team in Europe, they might be the best team in the world.
Yes. And so the fact of the matter is we're actually discussing C9 as a potential competitor to Fnatic.
Yes.
It's not C9 might be better than Fnatic. That is a thing that could be true right now. But we just don't have enough evidence to really convincingly say that. But that also means that C9 is arguably, a top 5 team in the world right now. So it's not a diss. Like, I don't know if we've ever really had that conversation in League of Legends history. Like, has there ever been a point in time where we would say an NA team is top 5? Like, legit?
No, I don't think so. At least not to my knowledge. I never even really considered like the dominant TSM teams to be like the same as C9.
No, nobody
maybe
did.
Old C9, like 2013 C9. Like,
no way. LCS was LECS is super weak right now, but yeah, I don't think they were ever top 5. Because you have to remember that, like, look at Korea in 2013, dude. It was
actually,
the difference
sorry,
in level of play was crazy.
The problem is this. I'll characterize it like this. There were times where you could have made the argument that TSM teams, maybe Cloud9,
2016, maybe
that these teams were like
2016
top
TSM.
5. But even then, you were making a very tenuous argument, and it was mainly based, and this is the distinction, on the idea that like, well, if they're that good in their region, maybe they would beat, number 3, 4, 5 from Korea and China. Now, we don't even need to do that. Like, as it stands right now, I think actually some of these Western teams would beat those teams. I mean, we saw it at Worlds, etc. So now it's a legitimate argument.
What's crazy is that we can also have a conversation that Fnatic, G2, and C9 are all in the top 5, which would mean that the West has a majority of teams in the top 5, and that is definitely never been true, which is crazy. It's really interesting and exciting.
I also just want to point out, like, this is more of like a maybe personal opinion or something like that, but I think that C9 is like the first NA team that this current iteration of C9 is the first NA team that I'm looking at that's really like made me enjoy the way that they play the games. Like, I hate watching NA, but I do sometimes anyway. I really like C9 and I want to see them do well because I think that they really can. I think that this is maybe one of the, like what you were saying before, like one of the first teams that really does have a chance. It's just impossible to really give them much slack when it's like, I need to see it. I want to see it though. I do want to see them challenge.
And by the way, guys, I don't think by the time MSI comes around, this will probably be true. This is all theoretical based on if we played MSI right now. Because LPL was on such a long hiatus, like I just don't think they're in the form. Now, this is not to say by Worlds that this will be true, because I don't think it will be. This is all just theoretical based on team form immediately right now.
I kind of agree with Brokenshard. The one thing I would echo about that sentiment is one of the reasons I actually do think Cloud9 is really good is that I actually do think they all have almost no weaknesses in the lineup, and the way that they play absolutely helps aid that. Like, they could literally, if they wanted to, play through, I think, any lane in almost any game they chose. That's why the drafts now look awesome. Like, maybe the real secret is Reaper was drafting before with global meta thinking, but he just didn't have the players. He had like good players in those positions. Now he can basically do almost any draft and seemingly they can make it work. So that was not the case for the classic TSM lineups. Even Team Liquid last year, like, it was fairly set in stone how these teams were going to play. They had their limitations, but they also had their strengths. This team really is like the most complete NA team I think we've ever seen.
Here's a different question to round out our show. Do you think that... How high do you think the second place LCS team would place in LEC? Like,
not very.
If it's EG,
they wouldn't even make. You know what? I'm not even going to be a hater. They barely make playoffs.
Or if it's TSM,
they'd barely make playoffs.
You think they'd make playoffs?
Keywords barely.
Fifth, sixth at best.
Okay.
It's not impossible they could edge out a Rogue, a Misfits. I don't think they would do anything beyond that, though.
Are we back to the Rogue versus TSM argument?
Coming around full circle. I actually don't think they would make playoffs. But
no, it's not like, the thing is, it's like C9 and everyone else. EU's like G2 Fnatic, OG Rogue, and then they're like all upper part, but it's like C9 and then like TSM EG.
Well, I guess here's the problem. I'll use your logic before, Monty, about how if Cloud9 was in Europe, then they'd have gotten to practice those teams. Here's the problem. Spoiler, I don't actually think EG or Fly were ever actually the second best teams. In theory, it was always just, can TSM ever get their shit together, which is still the question now for the playoffs. So I secretly think like TSM is the real second best team in NA. They just haven't fully leveled up. So my logic would be this. If they were in LEC, well, they'd either be a bust by now or they would have got their shit together because they would have been forced to by the games that they would have played. So I think that like they've got the roster to do it. I'll say that. Maybe as a team right now, they actually wouldn't. But the roster could be obviously a playoff team in Europe, I believe.
Yeah, I can agree with that. TSM are the better of like the three. EG, Fly, TSM. And then if TSM, like on a good day with good practice in EU, actually maybe would be a lot better than they are in NA.
All right. Well, I think that'll close out our discussion for today. We'll be back. Now we're normalized here. Thank you to AT&T for the sweet fiber that is allowing me to stream again in these pandemic times where
Reggie can sleep safe.
where upload speeds are in fact a rare and valuable commodity. So this has been the Nines Summoning Insight presented by AT&T. We will see you guys for more playoff discussion next weekend. Thanks for joining us. Brokenshard.